Good evening. Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Central Kane County Forum. My name is Patty Lackman, and I will be one of your moderators tonight. Tonight's forum will cover the candidates for County Board Districts 11, 13, and 15, County Treasurer, County Clerk, County Sheriff. We will then also host the candidates for the 49th and 65th State Representative District and candidates for the 33rd State Senatorial District. I want you all to know that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed, active participation of citizens in government. We never endorse a candidate. The League of Women Voters sponsors events such as this one so that voters are educated and informed on where their representatives stand on the issues. This is done in an open, unbiased setting. The League has very strict rules about how to conduct such events. Questions will come from the audience. Only written questions will be used. The questions will be reviewed for appropriateness and clarity by question reviewers from the League, over here. Questions will be asked by our moderators, Susan Russo, Barbara King, and myself. The candidates will get a minute to respond to each question unless the moderator deems additional time is necessary. Marianne Nas, who's behind the post over there, is our timekeeper, and she will keep a strict eye on the clock. She will give a 30-second notice and then a stop sign for the candidate to stop. The candidate will be allowed to complete their sentence, not a paragraph, a sentence. There are members of the League in the audience who will distribute cards and pick them up for submission. Not all questions may be asked due to time constraints, and Leaguers may combine questions that are similar. I'd ask you to please turn off your cell phones and refrain from making verbal comments to the candidates. Tonight's forum is being filmed by BATV, Tom Stillman over there, and it will be streamed live. There will also be a link to our website through The Voice over here. So, with no further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Barbara King, our first moderator.
Good evening. The first section of our program tonight is for the candidates for Kane County Board seats. And I'll introduce them all at once, but we have one who is missing and may or may not come later. We just haven't heard. We have two candidates from District 11, Jody Kanakula, a Democrat, and John Martin, a Republican. For District 13, we have Lark Cowart, and a Democrat, and Steve Weber, a Republican. By the way, we are reading these names in alphabetical order by office, as you may have noticed. District 15 is Lucas Strom, a Democrat, and his opponent is Barbara Wojnicki, a Republican. We will begin with a 2-minute statement from each candidate. And Ms. Kanakula, why don't we start with you? Okay. And please remember to keep an eye on Marianne, and she will make sure you are limited to 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, good evening, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for inviting me today, and I especially want to thank everybody who showed up on a Friday evening to participate in democracy. My name is Jody Kanakula, and I am running for Kane County Board 11. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and in the past year I started my own business, so I'm a small business owner as well, trying to navigate that. I work primarily with seniors. Seniors are my passion, and they're my population in my practice. I live in Batavia. I've lived there for 13 years. I decided to run because I felt strongly that I needed to get involved. I didn't want to just complain all the time. I wanted to put my money where my mouth is and learn more about my local government. I've been going to as many meetings as I can to learn about the issues facing Kane County. And my takeaway is that I would really like to be the person representing the people first. As a social worker, my expertise is in making sure folks have the resources that they need and making sure that they can access those resources. I think that the Kane County Board has wonderful programs, but we need to make sure that we are focusing on getting the people to those programs. And what I see now is that gets lost in translation. So I will be the voice of people who are at their most vulnerable and who need the most help right now.
Thank you, Ms. Kanakula. Mr. Martin.
My name's John Martin. I currently serve as the 11th District Board member and am running for my second and what would be my final term as in that position. I also want to thank the League tonight, those in attendance, and I also want to thank those who gave me the honor of serving as this district representative for the last 4 years. I've done my level best to serve the district during that period of time. I'm pleased that we were able to initiate the reconstruction of the Settlers Hill site and move that project forward. I carry forward, should I be elected, a number of goals right now. The principal one that comes to mind is that I want to make certain that the county is not maintaining underutilized assets. And the first one that comes to mind, and one that's been a recent topic of conversation, is the property at Fabian Parkway where the correction facility used to be. My goal is to put that back on the tax rolls, sell it, and have that operated to the benefit of Batavia and Geneva to turn it into a productive asset. I look forward to the evening, and again, thank all of you who voted for me the first time around. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Ms. Court.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event this evening, and thank you all for being here. Our democratic system only works when we have people who are engaged and when we have choices like we do here tonight. My name is Lark Cowart, and I'm running for Kane County Board District 13. I'm an attorney, a mediator, a swim coach, a wife, a mother, and a candidate. And as a candidate, I have a unique perspective in that I was a county employee for 14 years as an assistant state's attorney. And during that time, I saw firsthand the impact of short-sighted budget decisions from the county board. I saw the impact on the employees through the years of no raises and furloughs. I saw, more importantly, the impact on the people in the community who couldn't get mental health services that they needed, or people who were in jail instead of at home, working or in school, or the domestic violence victims in our community who are scared because they no longer have an ability to know where their abuser is. As an employee, I was blessed to work with amazing personnel across many different divisions of the county, and I saw that their work was impacted just the same as mine. One of the jobs of the county board is to run the business of the county, and I feel that our business model is failing. I think it's time that we recognize it's a good financial decision to have a people-first approach, one that recognizes that people, our employees, and our community members are our biggest resource. I not only have a unique perspective as a former employee, but my perspective was shaped by life experiences. I know how important it is to have affordable housing and food services here in the Tri-Cities. As a board, we need to be concerned about providing for our community members who are struggling, and not just the appearance from the outside. I want to belong to a community that not only looks great from the outside, I want to represent a community that is healthy from the inside out.
You still have a few seconds if you... Oh, that was the stop.
I'm done.
I'm sorry, I can't see. I'm sorry. Thank you. Mr. Weber.
Hello, my name is Steve Weber. I am your Republican candidate for District 13, which encompasses basically 85% of downtown St. Charles, the Randall Corridor, which includes the Geneva Commons, as well as Del Nor, all the way out to Fabian and Peck Road. So it's a nice microcosm of Kane County. I have a downtown area, more of a residential area as well as open land, so I think it's a really unique district. I've lived in the district for 14 years now. I have 3 kids. I've been married for 20 years. I want to represent the district. It's a district that I love. I have, my children go to school there. We participate in sports there. We support all the commerce there. It's an area that we're going to be for the next 50 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Strom, please.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for the League of Women Voters for having us again tonight. Really enjoyed this forum we had in the primary, and I look forward to tonight and debating these different topics. My name is Lucas Strom. I'm running for County Board, District 15. District 15, for those who don't know, is Campton Township, Plato Township, and Virgil Township, so it's West Central. Includes the west edge of the St. Charles area all the way out to Sorrento's, if you've ever been out there on the west edge. My opponent, Barb, is not here tonight, which was kind of funny. In the primary, we each had opponents, both on the Democrat ticket and the Republican ticket, and I was the only one of 4 to show up in a primary, and 2 of them are gone, and she's still not here. So we're making progress. But my background is I'm a lifelong member of this community. My family farm, my great-grandfather bought in 1915. I still live on that farm. I'm a farmer. My day job is actually I'm a tech executive for a startup company out of Silicon Valley. This is the 3rd company in the last 15 years that I've helped start up. The last 2 were in healthcare. Both of those went public in 2009 and 15. I have 20 plus years worth of professional background at the highest levels. And being a member of the community, and my wife and I, my wife is an attorney, or used to be an attorney for the Department of Labor doing ERISA law. We have 2 young children, and we have a 3rd one on the way, actually due in April. And decided to get involved locally at the board level to run for this office for 2 main reasons locally. The Maxim Glenwood Academy issue, and I personally know my opponent, that she's not a strong voice on the board and not an influential board member, and that's what I want to be for our district and our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to the questions, and I will ask them of the candidates for each seat, so that if there are voters from their districts here, they can compare the candidates' responses that will go around. The first question is from someone who says, I have lived in this county my entire life and have never heard of my current county board rep. How will you connect and engage with constituents? And we'll begin with Mr. Martin. Well,
the first way to engage and connect is to attend all the meetings and participate, which I think I have a solid record in that regard. We have, within the county, we have Kane County Connects, which is a publication that's an email transmission every day. And I think if you were to check records of people who have contacted me in the community, I'm responsive to every phone call that comes in. I've addressed every issue that's been raised, and make every reasonable effort at making myself visible within the community. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Kanakula.
So one of the things that I talked about during my campaign, and I have on my lit as well, is that I think communication with constituents is probably the most important thing that an elected representative can do. I cannot, in good conscience, be on the board, make decisions without knowing what folks in my district think about that. I have pledged to have regular meetings once a quarter in the community and invite people to come and learn about what's happening in the board and also to tell me how they feel about it. Going to the meetings is difficult for most people because they are during work hours, during work days for most folks. So how you're going to get there, I don't know. I could not have done it before I started my own business. But I have pledged. I'm going to have quarterly meetings, and I'm going to try and get a newsletter out there if I can figure out how to get it to you all. So that's how I'm going to connect.
Thank you. Mr. Weber, 1 minute.
Definitely, Mr. Martin alluded to the Kane County Connects. That is by far the most efficient way to get information out to the constituents. But another way is just by being available. Everything that I send out has my cell phone number on there. If anybody wants to talk after the meeting, they can call me on my cell phone, 630-774-6908. I'm always accessible 24/7. But it's just being active within your district, whether it's at a sporting event, a parade, picnics with the schools, just making yourself accessible and talking with people. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cowart.
Like Ms. Kanakula, I plan to have quarterly meetings at coffee shops here in St. Charles and Geneva, and have those available to anybody who wants to come and speak with me. But I think there's a difference between us as county board, if I'm elected, sending information out to you, and me getting out in your community, finding you, telling you what's going on, and asking what you think about it. I think a lot of candidates only do that when they're seeking office. And one of the things I've learned through this process is how important it is to walk your neighborhood and meet your neighbors. And I intend to continue doing that if I am elected, so that I'm bringing the news to you. It's not your responsibility to always come and find it from me.
Thank you. And Mr. Strom.
Thank you. I think they've mentioned all different good ways to do it. I mean, today it's a modern world. We're all very busy. I think social media, whether it's a Facebook presence, a Twitter presence, a Instagram presence, those are things that if you create a rhythm, an expectation, that's the most important thing. It's like that for business. Anytime you have customers and all our constituents are essentially customers, it's how can I create a rhythm of expectation? I can provide information out, but how do I really connect? It's knocking on doors. It is sending out information. It's having a social media presence. It's having updated information on the website, on the county board website. That's all important. And quite honestly, when it comes down to it, it's finding the right advocates that if somebody has a question, they say, call Lucas. He'll help you. He'll give you the right information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question, actually, I'm going to connect two of them. What steps need to be taken for criminal justice reform in Kane County? And in connection with that, would you provide support for mentally ill people who are incarcerated? So we will begin this time with Ms. Cowart.
The steps that we need to take to reform the criminal justice system would be a dissertation. There is a lot that's wrong. And as a 14-year state's attorney here in the county, it's something I know an awful lot about. One of the first things we need to do is bring back the electronic home monitoring and the GPS systems. They are essential to protecting our community, but also the people who have committed the crimes. As we know now, every day you're in custody increases your risk level for developing a mental health condition, a substance abuse condition, and also as well as partner violence. We need to make sure that people are not in jail unless that's absolutely where they need to be. We need to make sure that our sentences are helping to lift people up and not just punish them. And in terms of support for mentally ill people in the community, I fully support the actions for the crisis intervention team training and was one of the trainers for that. And I think that we need to be supporting the Fox Valley initiative and their efforts to continue to train our first responders in the county.
Thank you. Mr. Weber?
I would definitely say that would be, early identification of people that have, mental illness, whether it's, the first time that they are incarcerated or brought to court. There's a high percentage of inmates that are in there due to mental illness. And if it's identified from the onset, it'll save the county money in the long run, and you'll also help treat somebody that needs help that incarceration cannot fix. That's it. Very simple.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Strom.
This is an example of where if you don't have deep personal expertise in this area. What's important is listening to the right people, whether it's the sheriff's department, whether it's one of the candidates that really drives home, focus on recidivism rates, using the GPS monitoring, a jobs program, those types of things. Us as a board aren't going to make those types of decisions. What we need to make sure is we're supportive of our departments around mental health, recidivism, what our criminal justice is. So as a member of the board starting in December, that's what I'm going to focus on. What's needed? Tell me what's needed as an expert out there and make sure that we fully support that.
Thank you. Ms. Kanakula?
So I agree with everything that's been said so far. I also am really excited about working with the different departments, the Sheriff's Department, some of those ideas that are coming out of the Sheriff's Department to help folks who are incarcerated with mental health issues. As a licensed clinical social worker, this is my wheelhouse, and I would really like to see the board work with the different 708 mental health boards throughout the Fox Valley. They're kind of scattered, and so I think that there needs to be a comprehensive look at what they're doing, where the gaps are, how we can fill them, how we can really help folks who have mental health issues in a more comprehensive way. The Kane County Board, it doesn't have a commission or a committee for mental health, which is a little unusual for some of the other counties. So that's where I would start to kind of do a needs assessment.
And Mr. Martin?
To Mr. Strom's point, the county board does not run the judiciary, and the county board does not run the state's attorney's office. But we do have the obligation, and I believe we do that, to listen to our elected officials. Just at the last judicial public safety meeting, we approved the resolution for this year's crisis intervention training that'll be conducted by the state's attorney and the sheriff's office. Those individuals are charged with that responsibility, and as indicated by Mr. Strom, it's our responsibility as a board to work with them and as much as possible assist in finding the funds to do those things.
Okay, thank you. I believe one of you referred to affordable housing in Kane County. How would you make that available? Maybe we should begin this time with Mr. Strom.
Okay, again, affordable housing and making that available. Again, I'm not sure that's as much as our direction on that as far as it is to really support the agencies and the state level that can help with that, creating that affordable housing. We have quite a bit in our up and down the river areas and some of our more dense areas. I, as a district in 15, really have no affordable housing in District 15, but I will support and listen to my fellow board members in the other districts when an issue comes to the board on that aspect. So I don't have any more than that.
Thank you. Mr. Weber?
As Lucas just alluded to, at the county level, we have very little say-so or control of affordable housing. That's just not something that we have jurisdiction over, so I can't elaborate on that anymore. Thank you.
Ms. Cowart?
I think one of the things that's important as a county board member is to be connecting with the other branches of government. And so I think when you're talking affordable housing, first you have to recognize that it is a need everywhere. I don't think it's acceptable to say that's not a problem here in Geneva or St. Charles or Campton Hills. And then I think that as a board, if that's an interest of our constituents, then we have an obligation to start talking to the mayors of the town. We have an obligation to start talking to our state representatives. We can affect change. And one of the things we need to be doing as a county board is staying connected with our other branches of government, making sure that we have an open dialogue so that we can truly address the needs of our constituents and not just say it's not my problem.
Thank you, Ms. Cowart. Mr. Martin?
The county board does not run the zoning and the housing restrictions within its within the municipalities in the district. Now, I'm speaking on behalf of the 11th district, which an overwhelming percentage is occupied by the city of Batavia and the city of Geneva. We are supportive of, the ultimate. The one thing I can think about that we do on a regular basis is we have a jobs committee. That's not providing housing, but it's making every reasonable effort at improving the economics of the people that are going to end up looking for those homes. We work with the public, with the mayors and the city councils to the degree appropriate, and will continue to do so on the issue of housing.
Okay, thank you. A question about Settlers Hill.
Excuse me, I don't think.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
It's okay.
Ms. Kanakula, I apologize.
So my take on affordable housing is similar to Lark's, but I think it's really important for the Kane County Board to maybe think outside the box a little bit and not say, well, that's not necessarily what we do. Now, we may not be out there actually finding the financial resources, but we can certainly be in touch with the community needs and be talking to our constituents. In Batavia, there are 2 affordable senior housing projects that are currently in progress. One has opened recently, another one is in the process of being approved. So knowing that as a county board member, knowing that that's happening, working with the different citizens groups and the communities and the cities is vital. I think we can set goals in the Kane County Board and say, this is important because it's important to our constituents. And so how can we help that happen?
Okay, thank you. And again, my apologies.
No.
The next question is about Settlers Hill and asks if all board candidates are aware of it. How will the public access the hill, and how would you provide ADA bathroom facilities near the sports track? Let's begin with Ms. Cowart.
I have to take a page out of Mr. Strom's book. In terms of how people are going to access that, I am quite certain that we have very qualified engineers who are going to tell us exactly how people are going to get in there. And we are required by law to have ADA bathrooms there. And not only are we required by law, I'm quite certain that myself, as well as every single person currently sitting on the board, is going to make sure that any county facility is available to anybody who would like to use it.
Mr. Weber?
I am going to pass this question over to the gentleman that championed this whole project, who happens to be up here, Mr. Martin.
Well, we'll get to Mr. Martin in turn, but I'm trying to keep track of who's speaking who, and I've already screwed up once. So let me stay on my track, and we'll let Mr. Martin say it when it's his turn. Is there anything
the project
else
has already
like
started. Yeah, the project has already started. It's already under construction. All the requirements, the legalities have all been discussed and taken care of at length on the board to the state. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Strom?
Yeah, as my understanding is that has all been settled. I know that we had that same question at the beginning of the year, and I think maybe less of it was settled at that point, but I know that work's been going on for quite some time. So I know there's either one or multiple points of entry in the bathroom situation, I think, past all standards that the county and any of the municipalities would have here.
Thank you. And Ms. Kanakula?
I haven't been up on Settlers Hill, but I have seen the construction going on. So I am also assuming that there are plans for how folks are going to get up there. And having recently torn the meniscus in my knee, I understand even more now how important it is for folks to be able to get up there. But I also am going to turn to Mr. Martin because Settlers Hill was his baby. And so I'm sure he can give us the exact answer to this.
Thank you. Clearly, you're the man, Mr. Martin.
Yeah.
Enlighten us.
I answered this question this spring, and then it was taken off the agenda because it had such a narrow focus. There will be 3 points of access to Settlers Hill. There'll be the parking for events, which will be in the Cougars parking lot. There'll be the routine parking for forest preserve activity, which will be a parking lot directly behind the soccer facility. And for purposes of ADA access, there'll be a west road that will go in through the golf course property, circle to the top of the hill at a traffic circle at the top, which will allow for disembarking vehicles, emergency vehicles, and the restrooms and other facilities at the top will be ADA qualified.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question. Do you believe Kane County is doing everything it can to preserve its water supply? Let's see. We're going to begin this time with Mr. Strom.
Okay. Trying to figure out how exactly to answer this question when we talk about the water supply. A lot of our area out in my district is on well. And so the water tables and the high water recharge areas, when you think about what's farmed wetland, what's available to all the housing out in our area, is a little bit different than obviously the city water that we take in from, the Fox River or other tributaries or whatever we do. So that's actually a pretty complex answer, and I'm not sure how to answer where we are with our water supplies as a county. But the fact that that's something that I've always been concerned about and careful about as a farmer and a landowner out in our area, that's definitely something I'd be happy to look into more.
Okay. Mr. Weber?
I would say that at least in St. Charles, in my district where I live, we have St. Charles, we have well water. Comes from a community well. There's multiple wells. As far as I know, Kane County does not have a water department. I would assume that the health department does testing on the water that we consume, and hopefully that the tests come back fine. I mean, it's not something that the county, it deals with. Thank you.
Ms. Coward?
So I think it's important to recognize that our well water and our river is not an inexhaustible source. And just like any limited resource, we should have plans in place on how to preserve that precious resource. The question was, as a county, are we doing everything we should to preserve the water supply? And I will have to research that because I'm not familiar at this moment what the specific plan is. I can tell you just from personal observation, having lived in areas of the country where water is scarce, that in our community, we don't recognize that it's not a renewable resource. And so my gut instinct would say probably not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Martin?
The county is very active in protecting its water supply, its drainage, its flooding issues, and is currently in the process of redrafting and modernizing the applicable ordinances to that effect, and I serve on that committee. So we are, in fact, diligent in protecting the water supply for the county.
And Ms. Kanakula?
Well, I think Mr. Martin just answered the question. But actually, what I would like to say about that is I'm sure we've all read about how there is some belief that there are going to be water wars not too far in the future, and that protecting water supply, even in a place where it's very abundant, like it is here, is absolutely critical. So I'm glad to hear that the Kane County Board is working on a plan for this. I think that whatever we're doing, we can certainly be doing more. And as part of the 2040 plan, the Kane County plan, there are plans for green energy and protecting our environment, and this should be at the top of our list. Even though we have a lot of it, we certainly shouldn't be taking it for granted.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple questions that relate to the budget and county spending, which I'm going to try to combine here for you. Do you support or oppose more austere measures when considering any county spending? And which services would you prioritize, or would you lower taxes? Which would be more important? Services, prioritizing services or lowering taxes? Let's begin this time with Ms. Cowart.
I would oppose additional austerity measures. We have come through the recession. Our county is financially solid, and I think it's time for the austerity measures to stop. Related to whether I think services or lowering taxes is a bigger priority, I would say services. We don't lower taxes. I don't think I've ever seen that happen. And so right now, you're paying taxes to get services that you are not getting. And if you go and look at the 2006 vision, the vision statement and the mission from the long-term planning that was put in place under Republican Karen McConaughey, one of the things that they are prioritizing is services within the constraints of the budget. And I do believe that that is possible and is not happening.
Mr. Weber?
I think that currently the taxes where we're at right now, I think that we can continue to stay where we're at and live within the budget. I would say that the majority of services that the county is responsible for are being funded for the most part. I do know that the tax levy has been frozen for 6 years, and in that time we have a pension that's fully funded. We've paid down 73% of our debt obligation. So I don't feel like there's a reason to raise taxes or I would keep them where they're at right now. Thank you.
Mr. Strom?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the the fundamental question about when you're electing county board members. How do they view this? Because when it comes down to it, most of what we do is around the budget. How are we supporting our different departments? I believe in fiscal responsibility and also social compassion. I believe with a little bit of work, we can achieve both of those things. We have, if you actually look at they had a third-party consultant company come in and look at the expenditures at the county, and we actually, on a per capita basis, are more efficient than all the surrounding counties around us, including DuPage, Kendall, DeKalb, and McHenry County. So we're already efficient. We're only 4.3%, or give or take, of the tax bill. The Kane County Forest Reserve is 6%. Quite honestly, what I don't like doing is having across-the-board cuts or having a tax levy freeze without having a case-by-case discussion about the viability of a service versus the cost of the service. We always have to be efficient. We always have to think about it. But when it comes down to it, our job is to take a case-by-case basis, not a broad brush.
I think that sentence was long enough.
Perfect. That was one long sentence, yes.
Okay. Ms. Kanakula.
I would not support continuing austerity measures. I think I've also looked at the mandated services report that Mr. Strom was talking about, and it does talk about how efficient Kane County is, but it also mentions, and I'm paraphrasing, that although these things are mandated, what's not mandated is the quality of these programs, and that further cuts could damage the quality of these programs in Kane County. We are at a point now where several programs are struggling. It's like having a car and not taking care of it. That's my view of what has been happening for the past 6 years. And now it's going to cost even more money to repair that car. So I think we do need to be looking at things on a case-by-case basis as well. I think that is the most important thing. And as far as taxes, the average amount a household pays is 68 cents a day. Some people pay a little bit more, some people pay a little bit less. So I think that's worth it. And if you ask me to pay 78 cents a day to get the kind of services we do, I would support that as well.
Thank you very much. One final question.
Mr. Martin.
I'm sorry, Mr. Martin. I'm only confusing myself trying to keep track of turns here for people. Please go ahead.
I'm not advocating further cuts, but we and I don't even mean to say the word but in there, I'm not advertising any further cuts. We have a couple of moving targets here, and the most principal of our moving targets is the state of Illinois. And I'll give you an example related to probation services. Okay, nobody wants to cut probation services. This year, the state just simply sent us a notification saying we're going to cut you back $600,000 on your reimbursement. The state is a moving target that takes away our ability to control things as much as we would want to. The mandated service study says we run a lean ship. I'm not advocating any circumstance where lean would become starvation, but we've got a moving target in the state of Illinois that compounds the difficulty of that work.
Okay, thank you. Final question, and we will then take a break and bring the candidates for the next section forward. Would you feel comfortable voting against the county chairman? Let's begin with Mr. Strom.
Yes, but I'll take 2 minutes to explain why.
Just one, please.
1 minute. I only have 1 minute. Quite simply, he didn't put me in the seat. He didn't tell me to run. I'm not, for any reason, against him or for him. I'm going to vote independently. That's what my constituents, that's what our community members ask of all of us to do. This is simply the fact that when I'm presented with facts, when there's a decision to be made, I'm going to vote my conscience. And I'm going to do that with integrity. And it doesn't matter if that makes him mad, happy, or whatnot. I look forward to working with him on various issues, and I'm very easy to work with. So I look forward to that. But yes, I have no problem voting it. Yeah, opposite of him.
Mr. Weber?
Yeah, absolutely. I have no problem voting against the chairman. I'm beholden to my constituents. That's who I'm representing. That's why I'm running for this district, is to give a voice to the people in my district. And 100%, if I don't feel that it's the right decision, I will vote against. Thank you.
Ms. Cowart?
I won't vote against him just because he's the chairman. If I vote against him, it's because that's what my constituents are telling me they want. I have no problem voting yes or voting no, depending on what I need to do to serve the people that have put me in that office. I look forward, if elected, to working with the county board chairman and all of the county members, regardless of what party they are. But as everyone so far has said, the only person I'd be responsible to for my vote is the people that elected me to be there.
Thank you. Mr. Martin?
I don't vote for or against anybody. I've approached every issue that I've been given during the 4 years I've served on the board from the perspective of my constituents and what I think should be done. And I'm not very good at holding my finger in the air to see which way the wind is blowing. I try to do things as I see them and as I believe they ought to be.
All right. Thank you. And Ms. Kanakula?
I've never been accused of being afraid to speak my mind. So, again, it's not voting against a person. If you're on the Kane County Board and voting for something, it's really going to depend on, is this going to serve the people? Is it not going to serve the people? So, really, it's a question that I would have no trouble voting against a position that he holds.
All right, thank you. Each candidate has been given a 1 minute slot for a closing statement before we conclude this section. So this time we'll begin at the other end of the table with Mr. Strom.
Well, thank you very much again for having us this evening. I always enjoy these forums. Wish we had more than a minute. But thank you very much again, and make sure everyone gets out, research your candidates, and vote. That's always the most important. I think the last in closing that I'll say is a lot of the differences at the county level between Democrats, Republicans, is a lot of in the minutia. The reasons I'm running, there's two big examples. Number one, my opponent, who supports my same position on the Glenwood Maxim issue, has always showed up at meetings. The problem is she got voted against on the Republican side of the board by 9 other board members, so she doesn't yield influence. And so we need somebody that can represent our area and yield influence on the board. And things like when the Forest Preserve pays $28,000 an acre for land in Virgil Township in 2006, in which you can buy that land today for $8,000. Nobody checks that, and she was there for that. These are just two large examples of why we need stronger representation in my area.
Mr. Weber.
So I'm always going to stand up for what's right. I'm always going to use common sense to make decisions. I'm always going to reach out to my constituents and listen to them and see how they feel about certain topics. I'm going to make the common sense choice, and I'm always going to explore multiple opportunities to fund programs, whether it's through sponsorships, grants, or whatever, before I go into the pockets of the taxpayer. So once again, I fight and protect the little people. Thank you.
Ms. Cowart.
I'm running for county board because I care about the community, and I believe that we should each do our part to ensure that it is healthy and strong. Healthy communities have public resources that meet the needs of all the people within our communities. I believe it's time to put the people of the community first by ensuring that the county is providing those high-quality services. And in fact, that's the vision and the mission of our county. The mission statement said to provide innovative and high-quality governmental services in an economic manner to enhance and protect the health, welfare, and safety of those who live and work in the county. I think our current board has moved away from that mission. And if I am elected, that is what I commit to using as my guiding principles in how I vote and what I push forward as an agenda. I am committed to being available to my constituents regardless of party and being a fierce advocate on the board for what they have brought to me as their concerns.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
As I indicated in the beginning, I'm gratified to the voters that gave me the opportunity to do this for 4 years. I've enjoyed what I've done. I've made every reasonable effort at being a valuable board member. I had goals for my first term. I have goals for my second term. And I want to move forward and do that to the benefit of my district. Thanks.
Ms. Kanakula.
I think this election is about the type of community that we want to have. Do we want to have a community of excellence where everybody can thrive, where when folks are struggling, they know where to go, and where they know that their needs are going to be primary? I think that, like Lark, I think that the current board has put the emphasis on just cutting and making sure the budget is as low as it can be without thought as to how that is affecting the community. And I think that it's time that we shift back and say, well, why do we even have those financial resources? It's to serve the community. It's to serve the people in the community. And that's where we're going to shift back. And hopefully, if I am elected, I can use my my skills and experience as a licensed clinical social worker to keep bringing it back to that center. It's all about people.
Thank you. And thank you all for being with us this evening. We will take a short break, long enough to seat the candidates for county clerk, county sheriff, and county treasurer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I know that sleeper does 6 hours, so like, no, we probably are. Like, I mean, but what I know is yeah, right, exactly. That's how. Well, then it's like when they were asking.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Like just like a vote, like listen.
Hey, how are you doing? Good.
Okay, I wasn't listening.
Yeah.
So,
So
okay.
here's this is the list.
All right.
And I just tried to keep track of within each one who went first. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
And I sent this
For
to
protecting
it,
our
so
important natural resources.
I start the third section. I'll read
okay.
this.
And then we have to talk about how we're going to do that third section.
You guys talk, I don't know. I know.
Here's performance.
But that's right. Next time you're going to have a hat. But
What do we think? Okay, however you guys want to do it.
I mean, really, all of these.
I did not hear this. Congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering.
Nor should I. I shouldn't be talking about this, but I don't know.
I think that maybe makes more sense for us.
But I mean, I don't know how you want to do it.
Because I see all of the questions that are going to be asked for these members related to state issues.
Yeah.
And they're all going to either want to be asked.
That's my plan, was that original, to put them all together. So however you all want to do that. Whatever you guys decide is fine. Yeah, I mean, I did. Why did you guys?
I'm
But
sorry, I just never
however you want me to do it, I will. That's fine. This is.
I think
you
that's
got-
the most efficient.
Yeah,
You know,
you have two sheriffs and this will be quick. And if you wanted to split it and do this separate and then these two, you could do that. But I think I agree with Susan. My thoughts originally were to put them all together because it's all state stuff. Yeah. But whatever, you go through this.
you want me to get the first one? Okay. All right, and then Patty will do this. You don't want to do it? And then it looks like this is going to be a Sure, that's fine. Yeah.
Are these yours?
They're not, I didn't take them. No. But did you put
Did
those
you
there for us?
did you put the water there?
Yeah. Yeah, this is mine that I brought in. These two have not been.
Okay. Well, think about it. Think about it while you do the sheriff.
Yeah.
I'm going to put
I'll just call.
See, do you think they know? Do you think they know?
Is Ron Hain here? If so, please, would you please take your seat up here? David Rickert. Is Jason Snelson? And John Cunningham? Nope. I don't see him here. Okay.
Jimenez.
And I'll introduce Susan Russo, who will be moderating this portion of the program.
Thank you. And again, thank you all for being here. If you've not already submitted questions for the candidates before us in this section, please, raise your hand, flag down one of the league members, and please do write out a question for the candidates. As you can see, we do not have Mr. Cunningham, Mr. Snelson, and Mr. Rickert here this evening. They did not respond to a request to be present tonight. So based upon the league's policies, we will proceed with asking questions for Mr. Jimenez and as well as Mr. Hain and Mr. Kramer. So with that, we will begin with your opening comments or remarks, and I'll start with you, Mr. Jimenez.
Okay, excellent. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming here tonight. I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for inviting me to the event here. The League has been fighting for progressive causes for nearly a century, and I would like to thank the members here tonight for continually working to bring people together, which is, in my view, what democracy is all about. So thank you. My name is Nico Jimenez, and I am the Democratic candidate for Kane County Clerk. I'm a young, ambitious native of Kane County who has the passion, the drive, and the commitment to serve the people of our community as the next Kane County Clerk. I care very deeply about our right to vote, because voting is one of the most powerful tools we have in our democracy. I believe that in a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, we have a say in the way our government works for all of us, and voting is what gives us that power. So when we vote, we need to make sure we have someone at the helm of our elections steering us down a path of safety, security, and accuracy. Now let me be very clear. I am not a politician, nor did I study politics in school. I have a degree in food science and human nutrition from the University of Illinois, and I am a quality assurance manager for a cheese company in Bartlett. I'm responsible in my position for the ideation and implementation of policies and procedures that are specifically geared toward food safety and quality assurance. My role deals with extensive documentation and record keeping to ensure our products meet all food safety and quality standards, which translates directly to what the clerk's office does, where highly sensitive documents and records must be kept for the citizens of our county. We need a detail-oriented clerk that will guarantee accurate services and maintenance of vital records, as well as having the mental acuity to ensure accurate, efficient, and fiscally responsible elections. I am running for King County Clerk because I believe in our power and our right to vote, which is why I'm going to defend our election integrity and fight against voter suppression. Once again, thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Kramer.
Thank you. My name is Donald Kramer. I'm the son of George and Trudy Kramer of Batavia, residents of Geneva. I'm a resident of Geneva now for the last 22 years. Been married for 27 years to Kelly Shannon Kramer. She's a junior high school teacher in the Naperville School District. I have 3 children. Holly, 17, is a senior in high school in Geneva. Amanda, 24, speech language pathologist in East Aurora School District. And Colin Kramer, who is with the Sheriff's Office as a police officer. I've served at the Sheriff's Office over 30 years, 4 as sheriff, 7 as a lieutenant, 15 as a sergeant. I started as a deputy under former Sheriff George Kramer, who was my father. My goal, to bring a high level of professionalism and integrity to the Sheriff's Office. Some of my accomplishments, a very strong, focused command structure. I've reduced the number of lieutenants on each shift from 2 to 1, and increased the number of sergeants from 2 to 3, bringing better direct supervision and mentoring to the police officers. The creation of a professional development program to improve training, efficiency, and reward hardworking employees with specialty position opportunities. I've started in-house training. We do it each quarter. All officers are trained. We focus on hands-on physical defense, proper use of force, tactical shooting, community outreach, and law updates, to name a few things. I've also been responsible for starting and initiating crisis intervention team training for all officers in Kane County. I've improved the school resource officer program with Kane High School in Burlington, including spearheading new active shooter training called ALICE. We've had quarterly community forums addressing race relations, domestic violence, human trafficking, drug addiction, and suicide at no cost to the public or the Sheriff's Office. And I've started a countywide heroin task force focusing on enforcement, addiction treatment, education, and prevention. We have better equipment than we've ever had. I have all new all-wheel drive vehicles. We have brand new portable radios, laptops, GPS, and tasers. And we've improved the security equipment at the courthouse and in the jail.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Hain?
Thank you for coming out tonight, everybody. I'm glad you chose us over Friday night movies, and we'll try and be just as entertaining with a little information on top of that. So I was raised here in Kane County out in Elburn. I am a first-generation deputy sheriff, and I told my mom when I was 4 years old that I was going to be a Kane County Sheriff's deputy, and I never lost sight of that childhood dream. I can't give her credit for the Hain for Kane slogan, though. I came up with that on my own. When I joined Kane County Sheriff's Office after starting my career in DuPage County Sheriff's Office, I filled several different roles throughout the agency, from canine handler to SWAT team member and SWAT team leader for 15 plus years to supervisor of the narcotics unit, where we implemented new tactics that took us from taking just grams of dangerous drugs off the street to hundreds of pounds of dangerous drugs off the street and associated firearms that create so much of our local crime. But throughout all that, I was most interested in getting to know the people in the community that I was serving. So, and that does include people that I was driving up to the jail in the backseat of my squad car. And that really led me to an epiphany in my career right around 2012 when I began working on a jobs program that linked people with felonies on their record to employers that were willing to hire them. I got so tired of hearing, Hain, what else am I going to do? I can't get a job, so I got to go out and create my own economy. So I said, I've had enough of that. I've had enough of hearing that. So let's start making those connections. And through the learning process of that, it has become a passion of mine to infuse a program like this into the Kane County Jail, where we will have our inmates go through various OSHA certifications, forklift certifications, and finally, when they go to be released, they'll be networked with one of our community employers that are willing to hire them and give them a second chance. So folks, my website's very detailed, hainforkanesheriff.com. I would ask that you stop by there and take a look at some point over the next 2 weeks, because I know we won't get everything out here tonight. So again, I look forward to speaking with you all.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Jimenez, the first question for you is, why is the Kane County Clerk's website so user unfriendly? It does not respond to inquiries and sends the user to dead ends. Can you fix it?
I certainly can. And that's a good question. I don't know or understand why an incumbent of 16 years has not been able to revitalize a more user-friendly interface so that people can utilize and access that information readily. That is one of the things that I'd like to address first and foremost, because making it easier to access that information is vitally important. Again, making sure that we have everything laid out for the citizens of this county so that when they do go and request information or access the clerk's website for information, they can do so with ease and accuracy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kramer, the first question. Do you believe we need to arm our teachers in order to keep children and young adults safe in schools?
The answer to that question is no. My wife is a school teacher. She's been in the teaching in a school district for over 30 years. I've talked to her extensively about this issue. I've talked to other school teachers. I think there are some school teachers that would be very competent if they were taught and trained properly in the use of firearms handling. But just like inside the correctional center, we have no weapons in the correctional center. You're more likely to use a weapon if you have it. And we do have a school resource officer that is armed. And I would prefer for that person, if they have to use lethal force, to be the person that is in charge of doing that.
Mr. Hain?
Unequivocally, no, they should not be armed. So that is the topic of one social media video that I launched within the last month that addressed how I will increase safety within our schools so that we don't have to have this conversation. So it does start with a revamp of the patrol division that I designed that puts our deputies closer and more accountable to the schools within their area. From that, we need to work closely with our school boards to ensure that each learning establishment has consolidated entrances and secure entrances. And with that, some sort of checkpoint, again, this is going to be up to the school boards and what they're comfortable with, for how people enter and exit the school to ensure that no firearms do come into that learning establishment.
All right, Mr. Jimenez, how will you handle checking voter rolls in the clerk's office, and will you purge voters?
No, I will not purge voters. After the 2020 census, there's going to be a review of the rolls to make sure that we can clean up everything in Kane County to make sure it is as accurate as possible. There are people that are moving in and out of the county regularly, and so once that's done, the county clerk's office will have the opportunity to go through, streamline that process, and make sure that our rolls are as accurate as possible, which is extremely important for us to do here in Kane County.
Thank you. Mr. Hain, I'm going to start with you on this one. What programs or new ideas do you have to increase better relations with our minority communities in Kane County?
Another topic of a video I've done, if anybody wants to see that on this site, but we have to remember that police have created an antagonistic relationship with our minority communities. And if you look at the demographics of low-income areas, it's 60 to 65% black, 20-25% Hispanic, and a breakdown from there. And when I came out of the police academy, they would always point us towards those high crime areas. And I came to realize fairly quickly that those high crime areas happen to be the low income areas. And so we look at our incarceration rates, and they break down exactly the same. That's 60, 25, and a breakdown from there. So it's going to be incumbent upon us to not only lead programs within our jail facility, but also reaching out into the community and form services like job fairs within low-income neighborhoods to support those people.
Mr. Kramer?
So after taking office 4 years ago, I realized that there was a lot of tension in our community, especially trusting police officers, specifically after the Ferguson event. At that time, I started a forum. It was originally started at the Aurora Library, and then I copied it and did it at the Elgin Library. But it was about cultural sensitivity and talking about race relations and also religion. I've been very sensitive to this for a very long time. I think it's very important to have that conversation with the community. I also have taught my police officers over the last 4 years cultural competency. I think it's very important that they understand that there is different cultural differences, and we need to be sensitive to those things. And one of the more important programs I've done is the junior deputy program, and I've done that through East Aurora and West Aurora High School. I have a large quantity of Hispanic and African American in those programs. It's kind of for a selfish reason. Someday I hope to have those people come and apply for a job at the Kane County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you. Mr. Jimenez, our current voting equipment seems out of date. Is it time to bring touchpad voting machines to Kane County, or are there other solutions?
The answer is yes. Those are out of date. Yes, those are over 10 years old now, and there have been multiple research studies done that says that those machines, the DRE machines, are in fact vulnerable to hacking and threats to our democracy. So other than going to a touchscreen, in my view, we need to go back to a paper ballot and optical scan system. This is something that I've been talking about throughout this entire campaign. You cannot hack a piece of paper. And in addition to the transition to paper ballots, the other thing I've been advocating for is a more rigorous auditing system of our election. So we would take a 10% random sample from every single precinct and compare the ballots cast to the votes recorded. And then we aggregate that data with the rest of the precincts of the county to ensure that we have, at minimum, a 99% accuracy rating. That will give us the confidence in Kane County that our vote is being recorded the way we want it to. So I don't want to move to a touchpad. I believe in transitioning to a paper ballot system and increasing our auditing system.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kramer, next sheriff's question for you. What new steps can the sheriff take to ensure that mentally ill people receive treatment in the jail?
So currently, I was in a seed program with Ecker Center from Elgin and AID from Aurora, and having them come in, there's social workers and psychologists come into the jail to interview people who would soon be released back into the community. We have been doing the program for about 18 months now, and the program's been, I believe it's very effective. 4 out of 5 people are succeeding in staying out of jail, so that's reducing the recidivism rate. But what's more important is when the people do get out of jail that have mental illness, they need to have case management. Often when they get out of jail, they do have some co-occurring disorders, drug abuse, on top of having a mental disorder. So by having a caseworker that makes sure that they get the services that they need out there in the community, it could be Medicaid and getting help paying for their prescription drugs, but it also is getting rides to places, including the doctor's office, but also applying for a job and getting a ride to their job.
Mr. Hain.
Thank goodness for Fox River Valley Initiative for bringing the mental health initiative to the Sheriff's Office and really helping to fuel it forward. And I will certainly continue to collaborate with them. One of the biggest missing components, in my opinion, is the complete integration of our staff to have an understanding of what our mental health program is and what it does. So it should begin in the jail with the triage when people are first brought in with our booking personnel. And every single sworn and civilian staff member within our jail should be able to assist in identifying and redirecting any mentally ill individual to the proper services and care. And of course, continue with that case management when they're released.
Okay. Mr. Jimenez, with regard to the clerk's office, how can the county clerk, the Kane County clerk, encourage and increase voter turnout?
That's an excellent question, and one that I've been also talking about throughout this entire campaign. Educating our electorate must be at the forefront of our efforts when we talk about voter outreach. Currently, we have programs in place where local businesses can put up signs encouraging people to go and vote, but in my view, that's not going far enough. We need to actively engage with the citizens of Kane County and educate them as to why being a voter is so important, how to vote, how to get registered to vote, what do you do at the polls. There are some people, and I've talked to many as I've walked through the county, that have absolutely no idea how to do that. So utilizing town halls, forums, seminars, social media, just getting involved and actually engaging with the citizens is how we can increase voter turnout and help people get into the political process.
Okay. All right, going to our two candidates for sheriff's office. Mr. Hain, does Kane County have what would be called military-like equipment, such as tanks, weapons, protection shields, etc.? Should the county have these if they do have them, or even if they don't?
Yes, we do have that for our countywide SWAT team, and most of that equipment is stored at the sheriff's office. Being a 15-year SWAT team member and team leader, we do need those pieces of equipment for when those dark days descend upon Kane County, and we should only isolate that equipment for that event. I am not a proponent of seeing them in parades like we've seen recently. I think that's a bit obscene to the public, and it provides a bad image of what the sheriff's office is all about. But when people are armed with high-powered weapons and intending to use them against the public or police, that's when those vehicles and equipment needs to be deployed, and only then.
Okay. Mr. Kramer?
So when I became sheriff, we did have one vehicle, a military vehicle called a Casper, and that is basically an armor-plated vehicle. About 18 months ago, we added an additional armor-plated vehicle to the SWAT team. We have a regional SWAT team. Aurora and Elgin have their own SWAT teams, but our regional SWAT team really covers 28 other municipalities should they need us, and we've even gone out of county. The purpose for having two armor-plated vehicles is to be able to come in two different directions towards a target that would pose a threat to the public. So I do believe that, we want to be able to get our guys in there safely. We want to be able to protect them. If somebody has AR-15 or other type of long rifle, that's one of the best ways that we properly can protect them when they go to a call of that nature.
Okay. All right. Back to the clerk's office. If the state does not give the county enough money for security of our elections, and if you want to comment on where the money comes for that, you can do that. What will you do to protect the integrity of the Kane County elections?
There are a few parts to that question. First, the state does not really allocate any funds to our county elections. That's all through the budget from Kane County. Not since the Help America Vote Act in 2002 have we received federal funding either. So that funding and that money has to come from the county. And the second portion was, how can I protect the integrity?
Right.
Well, I've already discussed my view on transitioning back to a paper ballot system to protect against election or cybersecurity threats and tampering, in addition to my idea of implementing an even more rigorous auditing system than we currently have. The state of Illinois mandates that we do a 5% audit per precinct. I am advocating for an increase to 10%, which would be a more statistically accurate audit of our process. So those are the two things that to answer that question.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kramer, do you expect the jail population to increase in the near future? And I'll make this a two-part question. How can we lower incarceration rates in Kane County?
I wish the answer to that was by eliminating a large portion of the mentally ill. I've been tracking the mentally ill population in the jail since becoming sheriff. I think it's an important thing to recognize. It's been right around 23%. With over 500 inmates, that's anywhere from 125 to 150 people in the jail that have mental illness. That's not the proper place for them to be treated, or really it's almost cruel to have them in jail. What am I doing about that? Well, two things. One, we're trying to get better case management so that when they do leave, they don't come back. And that program, like I said, has been pretty successful, 4 out of 5. And I've increased the number of people who are being treated with case management when they're released from jail. The other one is to divert these people before they become inmates in the jail. And working with Provena and Aurora and trying to have a mental health drop-off center These are effective places that people that are in crisis can be dropped off and treated immediately, and therefore we don't have to take them to jail.
Mr. Hain.
So I will continue to focus on the 20 to 25% that represent the mental health issues within our jail. But we also can't ignore the number 87%. And national statistics show that as much as 87% of our incarcerated population has some sort of addiction issue to a narcotic. So our jail should be viewed as the fusion center that it is for most of the issues within our community. And that's why I'm steadfastly focused on my 4 different diversion programs, which again I've listed on my site. But primarily I'm most interested in my opioid diversion program that will infuse a doctor onto our staff that can provide the Suboxone treatment, where we'll then put folks to work immediately thereafter. Again, you may notice that common theme throughout most of my initiatives is employment, because I see that as our fastest way out of breaking the cycle of crime and incarceration.
Mr. Jimenez, one of our audience members would like to know whether the county clerk's office should be consolidated with the recorder's office as it is in McHenry County.
So there are several counties that are working to do this under the guise of saving money and being more cost effective. I know Cook County is transitioning to combining those 2 offices by 2020. My reservation would be there would need to be a comprehensive financial analysis to let us know that there is in fact going to be a cost saving, in addition to having a study done for both departments, letting us know that the quality of the services provided for each of those departments will still be done so in a high quality and efficient way. I can't make a decision whether it should be done. That would be left up to the citizens of Kane County through a referendum. But before I can make a decision on that, I would have to have a full comprehensive analysis on the finances, as well as a departmental analysis saying that we can provide such services from each department if we decide to go that route.
All right, back to the sheriffs. Mr. Hain. Do you support the use of body cameras? And if you do, how do they affect an officer's behavior and processes?
I understand that question.
Okay, how do they affect the behavior?
So I certainly endorse any use of videotaping by the police. Having had a in-car camera, as we do at the sheriff's office, it has helped in both prosecution and accountability throughout the course of our duties. Body cameras would be a wonderful addition, but of course we have to consider the cost. And if we use a model that is existing within Kane County currently, that would be Elgin Police Department. And they did get a grant that funded the majority of their body camera purchases, but the real cost comes in with the data storage, because there are legal mandates for how long the data needs to be withheld. And annually, they're facing anywhere from $700,000 to $800,000 a year just to hold data that these cameras are recording. So that's a strong consideration when we move forward in whether we equip ourselves with body cameras or stick with our in-car cameras.
Okay. Mr. Kramer?
I do like the idea of body cameras. They give different perspectives, more of a personal perspective when somebody's dealing with a suspect or when they're dealing with the public. The big issue is we already do have in-car video cameras. Matter of fact, about 20 years ago, I was in charge of the traffic unit, wrote a grant, and got the first in-car video camera in Kane County. Being that the majority of traffic stops involve some violation of law, not only can you get that violation of law on a camera, but you can also use that as your testimony, a first-hand testimony in court. So I think our in-car cameras are doing a pretty good job of covering most of what we need. And the officer can still keep on a mic if they do go off the vision of the in-car camera to, like, in somebody's house. And that alone is very good, because often somebody will say statements that are harmful to them. on a recording, which is very good. So if we had the money to buy all these equipment, that would be great, but we don't.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jimenez, the voter guide distributed with newspapers and on the Kane County website is very hard to read because the print is so small. How could the clerk's office publish this information in a way that makes it user-friendly to all residents of the state or of the county?
So I've seen both the electronic and the hard copy of this voter guide. The hard copy is a 5x7 little booklet. Of course, it is very hard to read. It is very fine print. But the first question was asked about the website and updating the website to a more user-friendly interface. And I think that's where we're going to start. If we can upload information on all the candidates, referendums, things that are going to be on the ballot each and every year, that would be hugely important and necessary for a healthy and vibrant democracy. People of Kane County need to see that information, and it needs to be displayed in such a way that whether you are a longtime voter or a first-time voter, you will have that information readily available and accessible to you. So again, that's something that I'd like to work on, is improving our interface and making sure that our website is easily accessible and user-friendly.
Okay, thank you. Moving to Sheriff, you, Mr. Kramer, first. Certain intersections have been identified as high accident areas. What steps can the Sheriff's Office take to reduce accidents?
So just recently, earlier this year, I started a traffic unit back up. We had been without one for the previous 8 years under the previous sheriff. It was only because we had so many people out on workman's comp that I wasn't able to do it right away. It's important to have a successful traffic unit for several reasons. One, they address the high traffic and high crash areas. And then secondly, they save people's lives. They're getting drunk drivers off the street. So it's a 2-man traffic unit right now. I'm going to increase that to 3 pretty quick here. And they're going to focus on alcohol-related crashes, which would be usually weekend late night patrols. And they will also be focusing on distracted driving, which is one of the major reasons why we have people crashing at intersections. They're not paying attention while they're on their phone or doing text messaging.
Okay. Mr. Hain.
So the quickest way we're going to combat that is through efficiency. Currently, we use patrol deployments, that we used back in the 1960s. So we see a high response time to calls. We see deputies that are not familiar with their patrol areas because they rotate from the north end of the county to the south end of the county to the center area of the county on a daily basis. So under my patrol deployment plan, deputies are going to be assigned by townships. They're going to be accountable to their townships. They're going to know where the high traffic problems are. They're going to know where the high crash rates are, and they're going to know where the speeding issues are. And again, they're going to be held accountable to the citizens of that area by attending regular meetings, whether it be neighborhood watch or the township board meetings. So essentially what we've seen is an overlap of coverage. We have patrol deputies out there. We've added a traffic unit that is doing what patrol deputies should be doing. So through efficiency, we're going to curb that problem.
Thank you. Mr. Jimenez, certainly elections are a local issue here in Kane County. Are you aware of any interstate cooperative efforts to clean up voter records or voter rolls? And if so, do you support those?
A lot of my, I'm sorry.
Do you support such efforts, interstate, from people moving from Illinois to Wisconsin or vice versa or wherever?
Well, first and foremost, a lot of my inspiration for a lot of my platform pieces and things that I've been discussing derives from the Illinois Ballot Integrity Act that's been proposed in the General Assembly in Illinois. That is where we have increased auditing measures. We have independent CPA auditors running audits on pre-election systems and post-election systems, and making sure that we have a more accurate election system overall. This is also including a paper ballot system to our current statewide election system. That's really one of the only things statewide that's being proposed right now that I'm aware of or would agree with, because again, I believe that in a safe and secure and healthy democracy, we need to protect each of our votes and make sure that they are being recorded and reported as accurately as possible. So in my view, and I am supporting those efforts for the Illinois Ballot Integrity Act.
Thank you. And Mr. Kane, do you support hiring and promoting minorities?
Absolutely. So I'm going to take a minute to answer that question. That's for you, Mr. Strom. So one way that we're going to infuse more diversity into our agency is networking directly with the community colleges in Kane County. So that's Waubonsee College and Elgin Community College. Currently, we hire off of a program called theblueline.com, and essentially, if you're in California, you can apply for a job here. If you're in Montana, and down the line. To me, that doesn't make sense. We need to recruit directly from the demographics within our own community. So we'll have fast-track programs with the two community colleges to make sure that our staff is going to mirror our population.
Mr. Kramer?
As I stated before, I've already reached out to high school age kids. This is where they're in their formative years and they're trying to decide what they're going to take up in college. I'm very active with Elgin Community College and Waubonsee Community College, as well as Judson and some of the Aurora University, to name a few, in trying to recruit. Recruiting really can start anywhere. It doesn't have to be at a college level. But what I found with the junior deputy program and spending some time with high school kids all over the county is that I'm encouraging them to take up a passion to take up law enforcement if that's what they really want to do. So about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I met a young man in the East Aurora School District that was with the ROTC. I encouraged him to come see me when I become sheriff. I was pretty confident I was going to get elected back then. I hired him. The other thing I want to say about the minority, we have the exact demographics in the sheriff's office, the people that I've hired, that is in the community. So about 36% Hispanic, 8% African American, and the rest Caucasian.
Thank you. That was the last question, so we're going to move to closing statements. And Mr. Hain, we're going to start with you, please.
Well, thanks again for coming out tonight. I hope you did find it entertaining as well as informative. But so this is kind of the swan song of a 2-year campaign as we wind down to 17 days left to Election Day. And I have had 4 opponents throughout this entire campaign that I've been very focused on. They are the rising violent crime rate, they are our nonstop reoffending rate out of our jail, a spiraling opioid epidemic, and unaddressed internet crimes against children. That has been my voice throughout the last 2 years. That has been my direction, whether I push out informational videos on social media, data on my website, or speak at various forums and engagements across Kane County. So as we close this campaign out, what I'm asking everyone to think about is, do you want a fresh start for Kane County? When you head out to the polls, I represent a fresh start with efficiency and a new vision. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Kramer.
I've been the sheriff for 4 years. I'd like to run on my record. I've done a good job, I believe. I've done a lot of positive and new efforts within the sheriff's office. Some of the biggest things that I've done is the programming in the jail. I have addressed mental illness. I've given additional treatment, drug addiction treatment to inmates. We've had employment opportunities come in, and we've started up the new GED program with the intention of giving skills and training to inmates if they want to get employment. We also bring employers into the jail to interview people for jobs. Again, the jail program we have, I think, is fantastic. I've increased the awareness of the heroin initiative by having forums. I've had 4 forums each year, the last 4 years. I have a county-wide task force on it, which I have a dozen officers from all over the county addressing the opioid crisis. We started an officer-involved shooting task force within our Major Crimes Task Force, and the Sheriff's Office is the leader in the Major Crimes Task Force. So if you put all that together with the equipment and taking care of my guys and my professional development program, I think I should be reelected. Visit sheriffkramer.com.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jimenez.
So when I walked in this evening, there was a sign on that table that says, "Voting is people power." And that very simple and profound statement is why I got in this race in the first place. I believe that in a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, we have a say in the way our government works for all of us. And I believe that we deserve better. I, in the primary, received nearly 30,000 votes, which was 1,600 more votes than both of the Republican candidates combined. I did that on $0 with a very grassroots effort, knocking on doors, talking to people, getting out there and engaging. And that's what I think the people of Kane County deserve in an elected official. I've now been to 4 forums hosted by the League of Women Voters, and I've done them all by myself. Mr. Cunningham has not shown up to required Kane County board meetings for the last 2 years with an attendance record of roughly 25%. And as an elected official, I think we deserve more. I'm running for Kane County Clerk because I believe in our power and our right to vote. And I'm so grateful and honored for having the support and the experience to run as a candidate in this county. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all of the candidates here tonight. We do appreciate you being here. And thanks to the audience for the good questions. And we're going to take about 5 minutes and reconvene with the Illinois House and Senate candidates at about 8:15. We need to switch things around up here.
Well, yeah. You know, it was nice to be up here with the sheriff's race because that's the most questions I've ever been asked. Like 3 questions right there. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we have what's called a lot of
I did too. Yeah, it was at, it was a crowd. I went to county clerk's office. All right. I just, yes, that's what everybody's saying. How crowded it is. All right, so 2 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes. Statements, 1 minute for questions, 2 minutes for questions. 2 minutes, 1 minute, and then 2 minutes. Well, Patty and that's what they said, 1 minute. Okay, they just told me 2 minutes for closing statements.
Are you going?
Thank you. You were doing 1 minute. Yeah.
2 minute opening, 1 minute closing. 2 opening, 1 closing. I misunderstood you.
This was good. Yeah. I'm glad we went over there. Good luck with your shoulder. Thanks. Yeah. It's completely different than yours. It's easy. But it's therapy. I mean, by office. By office. Not that as I said, I had no pain on the waivers. But when I was just doing I haven't seen his name. Now this right shoulder was more of the same. Oh, okay. They say you have to start, and I'm right-handed, so that would be miserable. I don't know what I'd get. Yeah, that people like Greenfields, you know, when I had that one, they say, oh, we had it done. This one again. Woo! Stop. Recently, it's not pain. It's just like yes. Knees, hips, all that stuff. Pressing. Yes. Oh, here, it will tell me. Do it. Oh. Oh, no. Well, Underwood isn't here. Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, it is not. What's it for? Stace? Bye-bye.
Questions, 1 minute closing.
Yeah. Are you doing this one?
No, Patty's going to do
Okay.
it.
Okay.
But there is a red.
Thank you.
Shall I? Would the candidates whose names are on the plates up front please come and sit behind them? Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was a nice event with the students.
It was. I wish I had a leave so early.
Yeah.
Part 3. And now we will have the state representative and state senate. Whoa. Okay, guys. Here we go. But first, I want to make a statement to the candidates. The league asks you, the candidates, to make sure that the audience at this forum and those who see it on television or read about it in the newspapers are able to learn your views. To that end, we want to hear your views from you. Please do not use your time to tell us what your opponent's views are or what your opponent will do if elected. Limit yourself to what your views are and what you will do if elected to benefit your constituents and the citizens of Illinois. Should you stray from this guideline, we will interrupt and steer you back onto the right track. Thank you. Do you need a moment? Okay, with no further ado, we will start, and I do things just a tad differently because I have a round-robin system. So we will start with Mr. DeWitt with his opening statement, and then we proceed for Ms. Zettler to be the first to answer the first question, Ms. Corey to be the first to answer the second question, and we'll go around this way. Okay, Mr. DeWitt, you're on.
Thank you very much. To the League of Women Voters, thank you very much for hosting this event. Tough to do on a Friday night, but great to see a good turnout. For the last 25 years, I've served in public service. As an alderman for 12 years in the city of St. Charles, I served as their mayor for 8 years, and since 2013, I've served on the RTA board as the Kane County representative, serving mass transit riders, the 2 million mass transit riders who use mass transit in the city of Chicago and the 6-county suburban area. Through that 25 years, I served as mayor in a community that was dealing with one of the toughest economic conditions since the Great Depression. We made all the right decisions, made all the right moves. We reduced taxes, we reduced our workforce, and at the same time, we were able to generate vibrant economic development in our city and have virtually recreated our downtown. We reduced taxes, we didn't raise taxes, we made all the right decisions and the hard decisions that need to be made, just like the hard decisions that need to be made in Springfield. I believe Democrats in Springfield in the process of trying to tax their way out of the fiscal abyss that has been created by mismanagement of finances over 22 years of Democratic control by one party. I will take those same values that helped make a great community even better in St. Charles to Springfield, to make the hard decisions, to protect the taxpayers of the 33rd Senate District, to make sure that they are not taxed out of their homes and their bank accounts are not emptied by increasing income taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zettler.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting us today, and thank you all for coming. I am Nancy Zettler. I'm running for, obviously, Senate District 33. I am a retired attorney. I spent my career, about 25 years, as a trial lawyer, representing plaintiffs in cases against large corporations. If you remember the Tylenol murders in 1982, one of the first cases that I worked on, not as the first lawyer, but as one of the assistant lawyers out of law school, was the civil cases that were filed because of the Tylenol murders. What I learned from working on those cases is that very often, not always, but very often, corporate America puts profits over people. And the reason I say that is we found out early on in their investigation of that case that there were 750 prior attempts at, not prior attempts, but prior tamperings by people of extra strength Tylenol, including Drano. We also found out that there were plenty of safety packaging available prior to the murders, and the reason that Johnson & Johnson did not use that was because it would have cost 2 cents per package. That translates today to corporations all across this country and all over this state putting profits over people by asking us to do things like give them money to stay in the state. I live in District 300. I'm sure you've read about the Sears bankruptcy and the fact that District 300 is suing Sears for back money that we gave them over the last 25 years that ended up costing our district over $200 million. The reason I'm running is because I want to stop that kind of thing from happening, corporate welfare, and I also am a big supporter of health care for all of us and strong public education. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Corey.
Good evening. Thank you, League of Women Voters, for hosting us. Thank you all for being here. My name is Tonya Kaur. I'm running for state representative in the 49th District. I am a wife, a mother, a business owner, and a public servant. So I've been married for 26 years. We have 3 children, and I am a business owner. My husband and I own Green Tea Services, which is a home services company located in Aurora. And I'm a public servant. I currently serve on the DuPage County Board as Chairman of Economic Development. I've been on the board since 2012 and very proud of our record on the county board. We are rated the best education county in the state. We are considered the safest metropolitan county in the entire country. And that is because of the close workings with the county board and our state's attorney and our superintendent of schools. We also always pass a balanced budget. We have not raised our tax levy in 10 years. We actually cut our budget by $36.5 million, saving taxpayers $110 million. And we did it through consolidation, through joint procurement, and shared services. All these types of reforms that I want to bring with me to Springfield. I want to bring my skills and experience to help people at the state level. And I have 3 endorsements from all 3 major newspapers who believe I am the best candidate. I was endorsed by the Daily Herald, the Chicago Tribune, and the Chicago Sun-Times. All think that I am the best candidate, and I look forward to your questions this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Villa.
My name is Karina Villa, and I am a school social worker. I've been doing that for 15 years. Aside from that, I'm also a volunteer board member at District 33 in West Chicago. I'm the proud daughter of small business owners. My mom's right over there. And the reason I decided to run is because as a school social worker, it's my passion. It's what I love doing every single day. The last 3 years, under Governor Rauner's leadership, I started to experience just day in and day out, my job became impossible to do. My families would come and share with me awful stories that they were going through, everything from the taxes that they were having to pay on their houses to not being able to afford medication that their children needed. And personally, as I was trying to find services for my students with mental health issues, unless they were suicidal or homicidal, I was just unable to find any kind of services for them. Finally, one of my breaking points was when I had to call DCFS for a student, which I am that's something that I would have to do on a regular basis. When I called DCFS this time, they told me that I had 300 calls ahead of me. There's something wrong with a government that can't take care of the most vulnerable people in its society. And that, to me, are the children. So I said, I'm done complaining. I'm not a career politician. I'm a social worker. I'm running because I'm going to represent those of us who are hardworking middle-class people here in the 49th District. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Richard Johnson, and I'm the Democratic candidate for the Illinois House, District 65. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for the invitation and for hosting tonight. I want to thank everybody that's in the crowd as well, because I know it's Friday night. You could be at home watching TGIF on ABC or something, but you're here because democracy is important. So thank you very much for being here. I'm a lifelong resident of Kane County. I was born here. I went to school here. I was raised in Elgin. I went to school in Elgin. I met my wife at Elgin High School. I raised my daughter here in Elgin. Oh, and I got 3 dogs, too, that I'm raising here in Elgin, too. 2 of which are rescues. But all that being said is because this community, where I've been and where I choose to continue to remain, is important to me. I spent my life as a public servant. I spent my life as a public school teacher, high school teacher in Elgin U46. So I work in Elgin as well. So Elgin continues to run through my blood, and so does Kane County. And that's why this is important to me. It's my background as a teacher and someone who has worked with people and for people that I think is important. And I decided to run in 2016. Well, it was the election of Donald Trump and the selection of Betsy DeVos as our Secretary of Education, which said that it was time for me to run. I know that the privatization of public schools is not the way to go. Our public schools are our bastions of democracy. This is where we train citizens, productive citizens. And when we continue to see schools that are underfunded, especially throughout the state, but not just in District 65, but throughout the state, where I sat at school board meetings for years, and our school board, the question was always asked, did we get our payment from the state this month? It's not right. And it shouldn't determine, your zip code shouldn't determine your quality of education as well. And it was those things that really pushed me to say, I have to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ugaste?
Good evening. My name is Dan Ugasti. I'm running for state representative in the 65th District as a Republican. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this tonight and thank all of you for coming. I'm running because Illinois is both a fiscal mess and it's a mess in the way it tries to, as well as supporting those whom state government is supposed to serve. I've lived in this state my entire life. I've been in this district for 25 years. And I can tell you right now, as I'm sure all of you are aware, the state is really a shell of itself of what it once was. Our families and our youth are leaving the state thinking about never coming back. We need to put an end to it, and we need to do it before it's too late. We need to move the state in the proper direction. We need to move it forward through more efficient government with lower spending and without any new taxes or tax increases. On a personal note, I'm a workers' compensation defense attorney. I come from a working class background, and I'm certainly not a politician. I've never held elected office before. Been married to the same wonderful woman for 34 years. I'm a father of 3 daughters. I have 4 grandchildren. All my daughters are married. I have 2 granddaughters and 2 more grandchildren on the way. About a year and a half ago, my wife and I welcomed my father-in-law into our home because he needed assistance. I come from a public education background. I went through the public school system, as did my wife and all my kids, and I suspect my grandchildren will as well. And if you're wondering why I'm providing you with all this information, it's because you've received a lot of misinformation and beyond that, just outright lies about who I am, what I stand for, and what I'll do for the state of Illinois. And I believe that you as voters deserve to know the truth. It's the only way you can make a choice about who is best to serve. And my hope is that once you hear us tonight, do your research into the candidates, you'll come to the conclusion it's me to serve in the 65th District. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll start with question number 1 with Ms. Zettler, and it's on campaign finance. Would you support legislation to adopt a small donor matching campaign finance system for state legislators?
Yes, I would.
Why not?
I would.
Okay. Why?
Obviously, because there's way too much money being spent in campaigns now across the country and here in Illinois. And unfortunately, that's the way that things have to run these days. I ran last time in District 66. I raised $50,000. All of it was grassroots. And my opponent had $600,000, all of it from corporations. So I was obviously at a disadvantage, and obviously I didn't win that one because if I had, I wouldn't be here right now. But it's a problem. It's a problem for both sides of the aisle, and it's something that we both have to, both sides of the aisle have to get together and decide that it's enough, and we should change it.
Thank you, Ms. Corey.
I think we definitely need campaign finance reform, especially with how much leaders of parties can raise compared to regular state legislators. There is no cap on what leaders of each party can raise. There is a cap on what legislators can raise. So what this does is the leaders are able to raise unlimited amounts of funds. So they cap the legislators, so the legislators are now beholden to the leaders for most of their funding. That's a problem that needs to change.
Thank you. Ms. Villa.
I believe that there does need to be regulations both on the amount that people donate to themselves personally and that their millionaire and billionaire friends donate to them, along with just overall, like Ms. Zettler said, campaign finance, because it does impact both sides of the aisle.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
I also agree. At this point, we can continue to talk about not just those that can self-fund. We can talk about leadership. But the bottom line is this, is that it shouldn't be money that determines who is the best candidate. right? And so I think that when we look at this, and I look at, 2 years ago when, Representative Stratton actually won her that seat in the General Assembly, they talked about spending $1 million, that there was $1 million spent on that. And now I look at the numbers and what is being spent in all sorts of races right now. And there's going to be many races that spend over $1 million. And again, I don't think it should be about the money. That to me is a sad part of this. That democracy is not about who has the deepest pockets. It should be about the character of the person who's going to represent the people the way that they should be represented.
Thank you. Mr. Ugaste.
I support campaign finance reform. I do believe that too much money has been poured into these campaigns, and that you may not be able to hear who actually is the best candidate because one side is spending far more than the other. It can create an inequality, and I believe that reform would be appropriate.
Mr. DeWitt.
I would concur with almost everyone. The system is currently rigged to prevent individual candidates from raising enough money to be able to run a campaign without having the support of legislative leaders who basically are able to have unfettered amounts of money dumped into their Democratic or Republican funds, because it works both ways. I believe the system does need to be rebuilt so that individual candidates have the ability to run a campaign without being beholden to party leaders for their donations to be able to do that.
Thank you. Public service announcement. I think for every dollar put into a campaign, there should be $1 put in to help for those people in need in the state of Illinois in some form or fashion. But that's the social worker in me talking, so, okay. We'll move on. And we'll start with Ms. Corey. This is on redistricting. Do you support an amendment to the Illinois Constitution to end gerrymandering by creating an independent commission tasked with drawing legislative maps?
Absolutely. I'm sorry, was that the end of the question? Look at your eyes.
That's it.
I absolutely support it. And I think you're going to hear every candidate up here that's going to say they're going to support it. But what you all need to do is hold us accountable, because every candidate will tell you that they support independent maps. It's when we're elected that you need to make sure we stand on that promise, either by sponsoring a bill or co-sponsoring a bill or definitely voting for it. So that's what I would ask from the public. We need independent maps. I mean, I don't know how many races are uncontested right now, which is wrong. I mean, voters should be picking their representatives, not politicians picking their voters.
Thank you. Ms. Villa.
I absolutely do believe in this. The 49th district has always been a Republican seat. My state senator is a Republican. My congressman is a Republican. This is due to the way that the maps have been drawn. So, yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
And so, I'm going to say the same thing. Yeah, we do need independent redistricting. And I'll echo what Ms. Villa is saying as well, that even in the same district that I'm in, it's sad to look at that there hasn't even been a Democratic candidate to run in the last 10 years at District 65. And it's been controlled by Republican. The state Senate's been controlled by Republican. And again, if we want to talk again about, hey, we're all going to say that we're all about this and not do anything later, the bottom line is, yes, I am definitely in support of having an independent. It shouldn't be partisan drawn. It should be about the voters. It is a one person, one vote, and then we are missing that. And I wholeheartedly agree that we need to have some sort of independent commission drawing these lines. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Ugaste.
I absolutely support it. I believe we need an independent commission to determine our maps going forward. That would keep one person from having so much power that they are controlling the state for the last 20 plus years. And it would also keep one person from having pretty much complete say over how the map has been drawn over those last 20 plus years.
Mr. DeWitt.
I concur. And I'm happy to be within a group of people conducting this event tonight that happen to support this as well. The most recent maps were drawn by Democrats. Why there are Republicans in those particular districts it's because the voters chose those Republicans as the better candidates in those particular districts. I support an amendment that would change the way these maps are drawn. I do believe it should be done by an independent third party. And in a dispute, it should not be decided by a coin toss, which is how the current law is currently written.
Thank you. Ms. Zettler.
Any Democrat in this room and any Democrat in this area knows that there has been a dearth of Democrats that have been stepping up to run because there's been a dearth of Democrats until the last few years in this area. To say that these maps were drawn by Democrats and the reason that people are choosing Republicans is because they're necessarily the better candidates is simply not the case. I do agree that we need to have independent maps drawn, but we need to make sure that this happens all across this country, not just here in Illinois, because in every Republican-controlled state, the Republicans draw the maps in their favor. So this is a problem that happens all across this country, and it needs to change throughout this country, including here in Illinois. And I will co-sponsor if somebody else beats me to it. If not, I'll sponsor a law that will change the way that we draw maps here in this state. And I will definitely vote for whatever comes up that's going to make a change.
Thank you. And we will hold whoever is elected accountable. Okay.
Please do.
Fiscal policy, and we'll start with Ms. Villa. How do you plan to remedy the state's fiscal problems?
Were you going to do round robin? It's fine. I'll take it. But Tonya was next. But
Tony was next.
I'll take it.
Oh, you're right.
Sorry. Okay, Nancy, I was sorry. How are we going to fix it? It's a huge issue. It's a big problem. If I sat up here and told you that I had the answer, I'd be lying, because if I had the answer, someone else would have already come up with it, and I would still be a school social worker at North Elementary School, where my heart belongs, where my heart is. So it's not an easy solution. But I will tell you that the solution does not lie on the shoulders of those of us who are middle-class, hardworking people, because we cannot afford one more dollar being placed to tax us. That's not where the burden should fall. We need to start looking at the top 1% and making sure that they're paying their fair share. We need to make sure that there's these corporate loopholes that they're able to just come and find ways out of paying what they need to be paying, that stops. We need to hold the top 1% accountable.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
We need to make sure that first off, that the wealthy are paying their fair share. That's the first thing. Secondly, we need to actually make sure that we are working on our infrastructure. If we're going to draw businesses into Illinois, and we do need to, and the businesses that are here, the corporations that are here need to pay taxes here. Because right now, a third of corporations in Illinois don't pay taxes in Illinois. But the businesses that we are drawing in, the only way we get those businesses to show up here is to make sure that the infrastructure is sound, that we have bridges and waterways and a workforce, a qualified workforce. Where do we get that? When we're funding our schools, not just our K through 12, but our higher ed institutions as well, is funding those schools and make sure that those students, when they come out, are ready. They're career and college ready, and ready to do those jobs. They need a qualified workforce, and they need infrastructure here. It's those things that need to be worked on, and also making sure that, yes, that the wealthy in our corporations are paying their fair share of taxes.
Thank you. Mr. Yogaste.
We need to start by reining in spending and fixing our problems. To just start adding to increased spending and costs would be a wonderful thing. I'd like to say we could do everything, but we have no money. We're a broke state. We have pension liabilities, and we are a backlog of bills that are in the billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, and we need to start addressing that now. The first thing we need is pension reform. We can start saving money on our pensions. We can start saving it now, not by taking anyone's pension away that they've earned, but by reforming it going forward. We also need to reform things such as our workers' compensation laws. And by doing that, not only are we going to attract businesses back to this state, but we are going to save every state and local unit of government money, because they all pay workers' compensation benefits as well. And they're paying it at a rate that is far too high compared to the rest of the country. We need to treat our workers well, but we need to lower our costs. And by doing that and cutting on regulation, we'll bring businesses back and increase our tax base. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt.
As I stated in my opening comments, I believe there's one party that intends to tax their way out of the fiscal crisis that this state currently is in. My view is that there's two sides to every balance sheet, and every fiscal problem is not necessarily solved by increasing revenue. Sometimes you have to reduce spending on the other side of the equation. I believe there's nothing either fair or progressive about a tax plan being proposed by either my candidate or the gubernatorial candidate in this race when they start talking about raising the tax rates on people making $15,000, $18,000 a year. That's not fair or progressive. That simply continues to tax people out of their houses and homes. We need to continue to look at strong economic development in this state that will bring attractive jobs. I would hate to hear the conversation taking place with Amazon when we have elected officials who aren't interested in talking about incentives or business proposals to bring those high-paying jobs and opportunities to the state and build our economy, not continue to chase people out.
Thank you. Ms. Settler.
So there's a lot of stuff to unpack here. I agree with Richard. And I agree with Mr. DeWitt, there is a spending problem here. The spending problem is throwing billions of dollars a year at corporations, large corporations like Sears and what's going on up in District 300, because they demand it. Not because they need it, because they're healthy, profitable companies. They demand it. It's a form of extortion. If you do not pay us, we're going to leave, or we will not come there. So that's a place to start. We need to stop corporate welfare. We need to start making them pay their taxes. I disagree with Richard. It's not 30% of the companies do not pay. It's 30% of the companies who pay corporate tax. We need to make sure they stop the loopholes. The loopholes in corporate taxation alone is costing the state $9 billion a year. Think of what we could do with that. And as far as I'm out of time.
Thank you. Ms. Corey.
Yes, thank you for this question. This is why I received the endorsement from all three major newspapers, because I offer real solutions and not just memorized talking points. So fiscal mess that Illinois is in, this is where I would like to use my experience on the county board, because again, we have kept our tax levy flat. Even though the state of Illinois took $3 million from us, we still had to deal with that and make sure that we didn't raise taxes on our citizens. So what did? We did consolidation, we did shared services, we did joint procurement. We consolidated or dissolved 7 units of local government. We have 7,000 units of local government in Illinois. We were able to dissolve 7, which is a starting point. And now the rest of the state is using DuPage County as a model so they can do that. We have 102 counties. Imagine if every county dissolved or consolidated 7 units of local government. That would be huge savings.
Thank you. And now starting with Mr. Johnson, on the same note, are you in favor of tax incentives for large corporations, Foxconn, Amazon, Sears? Would you curb or encourage these uses of tax dollars?
So the simple answer to the question, no. I think at this point, when we continue to look at, and I'm in favor of cutting taxes for all of our homeowners, right, our property owners, because understand that it is out of control here in the state of Illinois. It's a really tough thing. We have people that are on fixed incomes. My grandfather's 84 years old. He's retired. He's on a fixed income. His property taxes continue to rise. While in the same token, that I'm still supposed to say that I'm okay with making sure that I bring in Amazon and let's make sure that they don't pay taxes for however long that time may be. I'd like to see us do that for our homeowners. I'd like to see us do that for the people that are here, who've been here, who put in the work, who put in the time in this state. Let's give them a break. The idea that we continue to use incentives to bring in corporations who then either just leave, as Nancy mentioned earlier, about, it's a form of extortion. I'm just going to leave if you're not going to give me the incentives that I want. I'm not in favor of that in the least bit.
Thank you. Mr. Ugast.
I don't support it either. I believe it's terribly unfair. The businesses who are here, who stay here and continue to pay taxes, I don't believe it's a good idea. That having been said, if we don't do something about our taxes to where we don't have to offer incentives to get businesses here or keep them here, we're going to have a real problem. We need to start addressing our issues with the pension liabilities, our out-of-control spending, and our taxes that are just through the roof in this state, so that businesses want to be here and stay here.
Mr. DeWitt.
I do believe in strong, smart, intelligent economic development, and I do believe if we don't put together proposals to attract high-tech, high-paying jobs into this state, they will simply go across the borders, just like Foxconn did. Currently, there are data centers, some of the new wave of technological improvements in their technological infrastructure, being built across the border in Gary, Indiana, in old steel mills, and across the border into Iowa, because the state of Illinois doesn't have the sense to get together and put together proposals for incentive programs that'll bring those high-paying jobs into this state. With regards to the Sears situation, my opponent touts that she had got them a seat at the table when that was all negotiated. No one was sitting in it. For the last 3 weeks, I've been working with District 300 to come up with legislation that will actually put controls on who oversees the incentives that are awarded in those types of contracts, and that legislation will be presented during the veto session. Thank you.
Ms. Zettler.
So economic development in terms that my opponent likes to talk about is just simply giving millions of dollars to companies to stay. And that's what he did in St. Charles when he was mayor. During the recession, he spent a lot of time and effort and money throwing it at people who did things like building car garages and restaurants on the river while people were having a hard time paying their bills. And he refused to reduce the levy when the house values went down. But as far as Foxconn, thank God Foxconn's not here, because they're already talking about taking 450 million gallons out of the lake every day and putting back when they're done with it, which means pollution. I don't want that here in my state, and I don't want to have to pay billions of dollars to bring a company here that may or may not do what they say they're going to do. The problem with Sears is that they have been telling us for decades that they were going to have people working there that never showed up.
Thank you. Ms. Curry.
So I am a small business owner and an elected official. So I know how government can help businesses, and I know how it can hurt businesses. And I want to focus on small businesses because small businesses create 66% of our net new jobs. They are the ones who are involved in the community in providing the jobs. So as a business owner, what's most important for businesses to be able to create jobs, because that's really what it's about, is people working. We need stability and we need certainty. You know, we forecast 5-10 years out. So we need to know, what are we going to be paying in taxes? We need to know that our government is going to be stable. That's what's most important for businesses. So it's government's job to create the environment that businesses can thrive. It is not government's job to create, it's not government's role to create jobs. It is the private sector's role to create jobs.
Ms. Villa.
My talking points that I get are from the thousands of doors that I've knocked on in the 49th district. Those are the talking points, the people that I have met at the doors. If I say I'm going to give corporate incentives while the people in the 49th district are making decisions of selling their house to leave the state, I shouldn't be elected. The people of the 49th district can't afford to continue to bear the burden of the state's problems. We can't continue to give corporations tax incentives if we're not first taking care of every person who owns a house in the 49th district. That's where we have to start.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. Ugaste.
Ugaste.
Okay.
I'll answer.
Fiscal policy. Should voters be allowed to vote on whether the Illinois Constitution should be amended to allow a graduated rate income tax?
Should voters be allowed to vote on it?
whether the Constitution should be amended to allow a graduated rate income tax.
If someone wants to put it on the ballot, I think they should be able to. This is a democracy, and the people are to have the say in the matter. So if the people want it on the ballot, then they should put it there.
Mr. DeWitt.
To the first part of the question, a referendum would be required under the Constitution. To the second half of the question, if it was being done only to discuss changing the state income tax system, is that the question?
Graduated rate income tax.
That certainly wouldn't be enough reason simply to put a referendum on the ballot. I would not support a referendum to put it on the ballot specifically to discuss that question. There are other subjects just as important, like pension reform, like an amended MAP system. There are a number of other subjects that could be a part of a constitutional convention, but I wouldn't do it specifically for one purpose, to institute a progressive or a fair or staggered.
Thank you. Ms. Settler.
Well, we've already had a referendum. It was an advisory referendum on whether or not we should institute a millionaire's tax, and overwhelmingly the people of the state voted yes. It's always interesting when somebody doesn't want to have a question like that on the ballot. I think it's because they know in their hearts that most of the people in this state would want a progressive tax. I support a progressive tax only if it is going to raise taxes on those people who have been traditionally not paying their fair share over the past several decades. I will not support a progressive tax that would raise taxes on any of us below $250,000 a year income. But anytime the voters want to weigh in on a question in this state, they should be allowed to. We shouldn't be arrogant enough to sit there and say what we think they should or should not give us an answer to.
Okay, easy. Ms. Corey.
So if it's on the ballot, of course, people should be able to vote on it, but I think people need to be very careful with this progressive or graduated rate income tax. One of the gubernatorial candidates refuses to say what the brackets are. The only legislation that has been proposed says that if someone makes between $14,999 and $250,000, they would be paying 6.27% income tax. That is a huge income tax hike. So it is not only taxing the rich. But the worst part of that is if that would pass, it gives the state legislature carte blanche to move those brackets however they want. So if they want a little bit more revenue, we'll just move that bracket down to the people who make $100,000 or who make $50,000. That's the scariest part of that, because I don't think our state legislature has proven that they are fiscally responsible. I would not be willing to give them that responsibility.
Ms. Villa.
Can you just please repeat the question?
Should voters be allowed to vote on whether the Illinois Constitution should be amended to allow a graduated rate income tax?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Any more?
No, I mean, it's about time. It has to happen. We have to get this done. We can't continue to pass the buck. We can't continue to say that we're going to take care of this financial mess later, put it down the road. We have to roll up our sleeves and get something done. So yes.
Mr. Johnson.
So I believe we live in a democratic society, and if it was something that was going to be on a referendum, absolutely the people should have that chance to vote. But besides that point, I continue to hear over and over again that there is no plan for that progressive tax. And I'll just say that I know that there was legislation that was brought forth, I believe, by Representative Lou Lang in 2016, which did have, I believe, a tax cut for 98% of Illinois residents in a progressive scheme. So that, I believe it was, I think the cutoff was $260,000. So, I mean, if I'm echoing what Ms. Zettler said earlier, that if we're looking at, again, we're not going to continue to tax the working and middle class here in Illinois. And if that progressive tax means that it is going to be the ones who have not been paying their fair share, those that are making the millions and billions here, that they actually do pay the taxes that they're supposed to pay. then I'm all in favor of that. And I'm all in favor of being as part of a referendum because this is a democracy. We should be listening to the people. That's who we represent.
Thank you. Now, one on the environment. Mr. DeWitt, are you committed to moving Illinois to 100% clean energy? If yes, what specifications do you support? If no, please explain why and tell what policies you do support to protect the environment.
100% clean energy. Is that the question?
Yes.
100% clean energy would be very difficult to do based on the demands for electricity from the state. I think solar is a wonderful alternative. I think wind generated electricity is a great opportunity. We actually purchased wind energy as part of the contract to buy electricity that we wholesale to our residents in the city of St. Charles. They are all terrific alternatives. Until additional environmentally free generation can be produced, invented, created, we will never be able to get away from existing coal-burning plants. I don't think we should be moving away from nuclear as quickly as we are. It's going to have to remain a combination of those sources until future generations can determine more environmentally sensitive electricity generating facilities and machinery.
Thank you. Ms. Zettler.
I am for moving this state to sustainable fuel, fossil fuel-free energy as quick as humanly possible. I think that this is something that can be done if we have the will. I think we have to stop saying things like clean coal, like my opponent said recently at another forum. He believes in clean coal, which I believe is an oxymoron. And we have to stop, again, looking at corporate America and what they want. Everybody in this room knows that we can do sustainable energy as long as we have the will to do it. And until we stop catering and pandering to coal and to fossil fuels, it's not going to happen. We have to get our act together and insist on it and elect people who are willing to get that work done. And I'm one of those people.
Thank you. Ms. Corey.
I think we always need to continuously look for more ways for clean energy. What we've done at the DuPage County, actually, this is an incentive for businesses that I think we might all agree on. We incentivized businesses to build LEED certified buildings. So as they're building, make it more environmental friendly. It's one way we can do it.
Thank you. Ms. Pia.
Yes, absolutely. Let's move towards that goal. Let's stop looking at ways that it's going to be difficult to get there, and let's start finding solutions to getting there. And one of the things that encourages me about moving in this direction is being able to find jobs for people in this field, in the field of clean energy.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes, I'm in favor of it as well. And I know that the state of Illinois already has adopted Clean Energy Acts and so forth, and as part of that has led to some job creation. I think that this actually is an industry that is untapped at this point. As we continue to move forward, yes, with solar, with wind, whatever else that we need to continue working on, but yes, clean energy, alternative energy, absolutely. I think that when we look at our environmental impact that we have, we can't continue to deny that what we do has an impact on the environment, that our carbon footprint has an impact on the environment until we start to do that. And the thing is, too, is that we have to actually commit. It's not just about talk at this point, that when we continue to see that there are other leaders in this, if you look at Germany, and they have a very, very aggressive plan. By 2040, they're going to be 100% alternative energy, renewable energy, clean energy. And if we're not going to set a goal here, then we can continue to talk about it over and over again. But we need to set a goal and start moving towards that.
Thank you. Mr. Ugas.
Well, like everyone here, I also believe in moving forward. Unfortunately, it's something that's like our pension problem and fully funding our pensions. It's unfortunately just not going to happen overnight. So while supporting it and working on moving it forward, being it solar or wind, and we need to make sure we're watching those and how they may affect our environment going forward. But providing that it works and it works well going forward, we should be supporting things such as this and trying to move the state in that direction. We should also be working, though, on a federal level. It shouldn't just be the state of Illinois alone. It should be something we should be doing as a nation as a whole in order to keep things so that we don't put ourselves in an unfair or a disadvantage when it comes to economic opportunity either. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sutler, excuse me, we're going to start with guns. What is your position on banning the manufacture, sale, and possession of assault weapons in Illinois?
I am for banning the manufacture, marketing, design, and sale of those kinds of weapons, because I am not going to sit by anymore and let a man get up in a hotel room and take a gun that has not only been created and designed and manufactured and sold for the sole purpose of slaughtering people, put a bump stock on it, and making it a killing machine that shot over 600 people in 10 minutes. I think that's ridiculous. We need to really start cracking down on whether the availability of those guns. And on top of that, I'd also like to make sure that every gun dealer in this state is licensed by the state, not just the federal government, and also make sure that that the loopholes, the gun show loopholes, are closed.
Thank you. Ms. Corey.
So I am pro Second Amendment, but there are 3 bills that I would have voted for if I was down there. One of them is banning bump stocks. I mean, it's taking a firearm, making it an automatic firearm, which is illegal. I would have liked to have seen more bills preventing violent criminals from being on the streets in the first place. The man who killed Commander Paul Bauer was a 3-time convicted violent offender. He should not have been on the street in the first place. So I would like to see also laws on the other side for people who are convicted of violent crimes, enhanced penalties. I am, again, very proud that DuPage County is considered the safest metro county in the entire country. We have safe schools, we have safe streets. That's why people move to DuPage County, and that has a large part to do with the county boards. I'm very proud of that.
Thank you. Ms. Villa.
I do oppose those weapons. I oppose bump stocks. I do believe that we need to have some serious conversations around what we're doing with guns in Illinois as well as a nation. But we do have to start somewhere. Also, the gun dealer licensing needs to be more strict, and there should be some, if you've been convicted of a hate crime or if you've been convicted of any kind of domestic violence, that should take away your right to own a gun.
Mr. Johnson.
So I'll say to start that I'm in favor of common sense laws when it comes to our guns. And so I think this makes this a really easy conversation. I think it's common sense to say that we need to protect our students. So guns, I know that they're not allowed anywhere near, and I know that there's conversation about arming teachers. No, absolutely not. So that's common sense. Common sense to say that we shouldn't allow bump stocks or any other accessory which makes any rifle, whether it's an assault rifle, whatever it is. If the purpose is to turn it into some sort of mimicry of an automatic weapon, then it shouldn't be allowed, period. And so the assault style rifles, again, those, yes, that are made and manufactured, marketed for the purpose of selling to people who want to hurt many, many people quickly. It's common sense to say no, it shouldn't be allowed. And that's where I'm at with it.
Thank you. Mr. Yugas.
I also am pro Second Amendment, but I do support certain ideas such as the bump stocks that everyone's mentioned here. I would not allow them. I think we should ban them. I also think we need to make certain that guns are not in the hands of mentally ill people who show an ability or a willingness or a desire to hurt other people. And we need to work on that. And I believe in doing that, we will address a lot of our problem that we're dealing with right now.
Mr. DeWitt.
Also pro Second Amendment. I do not support the ban on assault weapons. However, I would support a ban on the equipment like bump stocks that do make them automatic weapons. they are no more dangerous than any other gun that is sold in any gun shop, and I would not ban assault rifles. There was some great legislation coming out of Springfield this past spring that allows a judge to take guns away from a family member if it's proven that they are a danger to either themselves or the people around them. So judges finally do have the ability to take guns away from dangerous people. I would also support enforcing laws and making them more strict for people who don't properly store their weapons. Perhaps other members of their family have access to them, and would also like to see increased sentencing on gun violations.
Thank you. And starting with Ms. Corey, this is on refugees. Do we owe refugees shelter from the storm, or should we take steps to keep them out of Illinois?
Again, I think everything is a balance, and we need to look at who we are letting in and who we are not letting in on an individual basis.
Ms. Villa.
If we have refugees in Illinois, it means that they've entered the country legally, and we would welcome them into Illinois. I would be welcoming of them to Illinois. There's such rich diversity that comes with having families from different parts of the world coming into our state. As a school social worker, I worked very closely with many families who were refugees, and they just brought such beautiful diversity to the town, to the schools, and so I would absolutely be welcoming of refugee families.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
So if we have someone that has refugee status, obviously coming into the country, there's a very stringent process for those that come in under that status. So first and foremost, I'll take umbrage with what's been said so far, the idea of that we need to make sure who that person is. Well, that is something that we do as far as through the immigration process, through the federal system. So that whole thing, I'm not sure I understand that, but the second part that to me, if we're talking about us as the richest country in the world, are we to then turn our backs on people who are in situations where they are not safe in their own countries? Is that really who we are? If that's who we would believe is who we are, I think we're in deep trouble. I think that the idea is that those that have the issues that have, the ones that show up here as refugees, these are not just, your run-of-the-mill people. These are people who are leaving the country because they're in danger. And I think that as a humanitarian effort, as a human effort, there's no reason why we shouldn't have them and allow them here in Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yogaste.
Well, first, refugees are a federal question, and once the federal government's answered that question and decided how many we're going to take in and who we take in and whether they've passed the proper security checks, as have been mentioned, then I believe Illinois should certainly do its share on a proportional level, though, to other states. I would love to say that we could take in every refugee that comes into this country and provide them with homes and jobs and everything else. I just don't know that that's completely practical. It's sort of like saying, well, I'm going to spend in order to solve all our problems, but yet we have no money. So take in as many as we can, certainly. Our proportional share that the federal government allows to come in based upon our size and a population as a state.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt.
Last time I checked, this is still land of the free. And, my ancestors came to the United States in 1917 on a boat from Belgium. But they came through Ellis Island. They came through and registered as immigrants, settled in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and eventually settled in the Fox Valley here in St. Charles. I do believe anybody who goes through the proper screening that the federal authorities establish with regards to immigrants coming into this country have every right to come here. There are many illegal immigrants who make their way into this state, and unfortunately some of them get into trouble. I don't think they should have any opportunity once they break the law in this country, illegally or otherwise, that they should continue to have the right to stay here as an immigrant, illegal or otherwise. So I think the key is border security. I think the key is people going through the appropriate steps to come into this country, to go through the proper screening, and make sure that they're going to be contributing members of this society.
Ms. Sutler.
I agree that people who are here as refugees who have gone through the process should be welcomed into the country. I also agree that there should be, we obviously cannot take everybody. We're going to have to make sure that we take them, the people that we can. But since we've gone this route now, as far as quote unquote illegal immigration is concerned, if we're going to get serious about immigration into this country with people who are here illegally, what we're going to have to do to stop it is to crack down on the businesses who ask these people to come in here, take them in as workers, treat them like garbage because they know they cannot go to the authorities and ask, for help, and pay them substandard and sometimes slave-like wages. So it's not just one reason these problems exist. There's lots of reasons, and as long as we're going to keep looking at just one side of it, it's never going to change, and it's not going to help parties that are trying to come here and help their families back home.
Thank you. Starting with Ms. Villa, do you support a woman's right to choose? What can be done in Illinois to protect reproductive rights if Roe versus Wade is repealed? Will House Bill 40 be strong enough?
We have to protect a woman's right to choose. I am pro-choice. We need to make sure that as a state, we do as much as we. Is it just me, or is it getting
cutting in and out?
Okay. We have to do as much as we can to protect women, and as a state, whatever we can do to put in place to protect our women here in Illinois, we should put those measures and protections in place. And I actually am not versed in the bill that was spoken of, so I can't answer that question.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
I am pro-choice, absolutely. And I think that one of the things that we can do, and I mean, there's a lot that could happen here, right? So that if Roe versus Wade, we'd have to have a challenge, ends up at the Supreme Court, and there still has to be a decision that's made. And at that point, that's really, I think, when we have to really look at how then we protect that right to choose. At this point, I think it's a little tough to say how we could do it without knowing what that decision is going to be, what that decision is, and what the decision says. I think that we still could focus on legislation here in Illinois. I don't know that HB 40 actually is going to be strong enough to protect that.
Thank you. Mr. Uga.
I am pro-life. I will make 3 exceptions, though. If there's life of the mother's in jeopardy, or in danger, if it's a situation involving rape or situation involving incest, I would make those 3 exceptions. I too support women's health and women's health care initiatives. I believe it's very important as a father of 3 daughters and having 2 granddaughters to support such things.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt.
A woman's right to choose is currently the law of the land. I think the term that's been bounced around lately is a 40-year-old settled law. I would not have supported legislation that allowed public funds to be used for those procedures, and would not want to see that procedure criminalized in the highly unlikely event that Roe v. Wade is ever overturned. I think when you have senior leaders in the Republican Party talking about whether or not that's law that is well settled and shouldn't be changed, I find it highly unlikely that that reversal would ever take place.
Ms. Sattler.
So it's easy to say it's the law of the land and I will follow the law of the land, but I think the real question that needs to be asked here is, what would you do if Roe versus Wade is overturned? And if there is a movement here in this state to overturn a woman's right to choose here in Illinois, and I have not heard an answer to that from my opponent. I am unequivocally 110% pro-choice. I think a woman's right to privacy in her own body and the choices that she makes related to that privacy are sacrosanct, and I would do whatever I could to make sure that HB 40 or whatever other legislation we needed to have here in Illinois was put in place to make sure that those rights are never touched.
A woman's right to choose affects the entire family. It affects the community. It affects the economy. And, you know, to make it sound like this is something that's done on a whim because they had an accidental sexual encounter and became pregnant simplifies it so much. There's so much that goes into it, and it's our right to make those decisions with our bodies and our families.
Thank you. Ms. Corey.
I am pro-life, and actually HB 40 there was two reasons for that. It was to make public funding of abortions, which I disagree with, and I have pro-choice friends who also disagree with that because the state is almost bankrupt, and we didn't need to add one more social service. The second part of HB 40 was to exactly protect Illinois if Roe versus Wade was ever overturned. That was the reason for the bill.
Thank you. On to education, starting with Mr. Johnson. The legislature has promised school districts equitable and adequate funding will be achieved with a minimum $350 million increase each year for the evidence-based funding formula. How do you propose that the legislature can meet that promise for the next 8 years?
So you brought up the equitable funding formula, and I think that was something that I think was finally a step in the right direction when it comes to funding our schools. As I said, I spent my entire life as a teacher, and I spent it in Elgin U46, which has had its ups and downs when it comes to finances. And one of the things that always was the issue, again, is whether or not the state, which of course is supposed to be the majority funder of our schools. They're supposed to, so majority, last time I checked, would be over 50%. They're not funding at over 50%. They haven't, and haven't for a very long time. So I understand that there is a promise at this point, and I can tell you that even in speaking just to the district that I work in, I know that it meant an extra $23 million in operating costs, funding that they'd received that they did not receive before. Does that make a difference in a school district like that of 40,000 students? Absolutely. So what I would say is that we need to find whatever way we can to make sure that we continue that funding. We made that promise. We need to stick to that promise.
Thank you. Mr. Ugaste.
I'm sorry, could you read the question one more time?
It's a long one.
That's why I'm asking you to read it one more time. I want to make certain I get it correct.
The legislature has promised school districts equitable and adequate funding that will be achieved with a minimum of $350 million increase each year for the evidence-based funding formula. How do you propose the legislature can meet that promise for the next 8 years?
Well, we're going to have to. If we pass a law, we reach a contractual obligation or tell our citizens we're going to do something, we need to find a way to accomplish it. So we will have to find the funding somewhere. But the best way to do that is, again, to start with some of the items I've been talking about. If we start reforming pensions, we start changing our workers' compensation law, we rein in our out-of-control spending in the state, we will start to bring more businesses and people back to Illinois. We will increase our tax base, we will have more money to spend, and we will be able to meet our obligations under that bill. And I am all for it. I agree. The state needs to start doing its share at funding education as it's mandated to under the Constitution.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt.
My predecessor, Senator Karen McConaughey, was very involved in the redraw of that legislation. The $350 million that was allocated to education is a great place to start. But like a lot of funds in the city of Springfield, they tend to get swept at budget time when funds start falling short in other areas of the budget process. I think the key to the increase in funding is to keep it there, almost put it in a lockbox category, and make sure it's not allowed to be swept. I would also like to continue the work Senator McConaughey started by finding ways to increase that amount of money every year, if for nothing else, simply to keep up with the cost of inflation. The expenses incurred in running a school district, whether it's a small district or a large district, go up every year. We need to find ways to continue to keep up with inflation to make sure, A, that fund stays in place, and B, we can try to grow it moving forward.
So we do need to make the state pay the constitutionally mandated share of 51%. In this district, our school districts here pay anywhere between 70 and 75% of the costs of schools in property taxes. And that obviously, to be able to reduce that down by 20 or 25% would make a huge difference in the amount of property taxes that we pay. Again, there's a lot of waste out there that we can use to fund this stuff, but it has nothing to do with the most vulnerable people in this state. Mr. Rauner, when he came into office, made $850 million in cuts, and a lot of that went to cuts to education, into higher education, as well as social services. My opponent on other occasions has said that he is in favor of way more cuts, deep cuts, painful cuts, and I think the word he used was cuts don't affect anybody until they're painful.
Well, what would you do? Let's not remember what I read at the beginning. I want to hear your position. Okay?
Can I have more time?
15 seconds.
Okay. My position is that we stop handing more money away to corporations and that we start making those corporations pay their fair share in taxes. That's the only way we're going to raise revenue outside of raising taxes on millionaires.
Thank you. Ms. Corey.
So one of the problems we have is that our education is funded by property taxes. And it is in our state constitution that it should be funded by the state. So that's problem number one. What adds to that problem is the city of Chicago, many of their buildings are woefully underassessed. So they're not paying their fair share of property taxes. That's why CPS is always asking for more money. For instance, Willis Tower sold for $1.2 billion. It's assessed on the books for $550 million. And there are many, many buildings in downtown Chicago like that. So they are not paying their property taxes to CPS. What the problem for us is, out here in the suburbs, who has to pick up that bill? You and I have to pick up that bill. That's why one of the first legislations I want to pass is fair and equitable property tax assessments. So the city of Chicago starts paying their fair share of property taxes to fund their schools.
Via.
Before the state passed this funding formula, West Chicago was one of the poorest school districts, if not the poorest school district in DuPage County. So we saw that we were spending about $7,300 a year to educate each child, where other school districts in DuPage County were spending about $22,000 each year to educate each child. And everyone was getting money from the state. West Chicago, as well as the districts that were spending $22,000 a year to educate their children. So with this new formula, West Chicago has been a recipient of more of the money. So we can't continue to, we're really excited as West Chicago that we're going to be getting more money, but the state can't continue to give money to these districts. They'll still have their property taxes that they'll be able to put into their schools. But the state can't continue to give money to these other schools. Also, we can't be giving money to charter schools. That's one thing in the legislation that I was not happy about.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. Ugaste, mental health. What would you do to ensure access to mental health services for children, youth, and adults?
To ensure
access to mental health services for children, youth, and adults.
if they couldn't afford to pay for it themselves, I would look to have the state assist them in some way, either through one of the Medicaid programs, or did you say adults as well, Medicare if they qualify for it? So other than that, if they can afford to pay for it themselves, just makes certain that it's available to them in some form.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt.
Ask the question. Could you ask the question again, please?
What would you do to ensure access to mental health services for children, youth, and adults?
Well, I think it starts at every level. I think with children, it starts with services that can be provided within their school districts. Mental health issues are treated by most insurance companies just like any health issue. It's not a separate problem that people need to deal with at any level, whether they're children, youth, or adults. I think the key is to find within their particular situation, whether it's a school, or junior high, or a middle school, if they're having issues, those issues need to be identified by the professionals within those organizations, and then try to determine what the best path of medication or treatment may be for every individual situation.
Thank you. Ms. Settler.
So again, within the original $850 million cuts that Governor Rauner made, a lot of long-standing, well-respected, very effective mental health facilities in this state went by the wayside. And a lot of social workers have been hurt, and a lot of people that are out of jobs that used to provide mental health services to all levels, kids through adults, to assume that everybody in this state has insurance that will cover something like this and have insurance at all is to me amazing. But we have a responsibility in this state for all the reasons we've talked about earlier with guns and things like that. We have to make sure that there's proper mental health care given in this state across the board.
Thank you. Ms. Corey.
Yes, I'm hoping pension reform is going to come up at some point, because I think the root of every social service that doesn't have enough funding is because of pensions, because it eats up 25% of our budget. In other states, it's more like 9 or 10%. So until we solve our pension crisis, we're not going to have enough funding for all these other really important services. I sit on the board of Family Counseling Services in Aurora, who provides mental health. It's a nonprofit. And they've reformed it so they do not rely on state money, because unfortunately, times are changing and nonprofits need to restructure so they rely less and less on state funding. They do take some Medicaid patients, but all of these things are important and we need the funding for it. So we need to reform some things in our government to make sure we can cover all these needed services for the most vulnerable.
Thank you. Ms. Villa.
I will not be thinking of holding people with mental health issues hostage until the pension problem has been replaced, because it's such a critical issue. I need about 45 minutes to talk about it, but this issue is significant and it's deep. And if we don't address it immediately, we're in crisis. I work in a kindergarten through 5th grade school setting, and unless my students are suicidal or homicidal, I can't find them help. That means I have students who are in 2nd grade, 3rd grade who are cutting themselves. I can't find services for them. I have students who are having severe anxiety. I have students who don't speak. I can't find them services. They don't speak. They have selective mutism. I can't find them services. As was suggested before, that it should be taken care of in the school. As a school social worker, I can't prescribe medication. As a school social worker, I can't diagnose. So it's a crisis in Illinois. We need to restore mental health services.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
It's, I think in this case, I think it becomes something where, the question was, what do we need to do as we step up, right? And we start with our children, we have our young people, we have our adults, and I think it's really easy to look at first and foremost, that we're not funding our schools, we don't have social workers. In fact, many of them end up getting cut. Or we end up in a situation, as Ms. Villa was talking about, that you have a single person who is supposed to be the social worker for 600 kids. The idea is that we don't take this stuff seriously because we're not putting our efforts, our money where our mouth is here, and making sure that we fund not just at the school so that they can have the social work help, and not only that, but also the social emotional issues that our kids come to school with every single day. We're not addressing that. We're ignoring it and deciding it's not important. So we need to make sure we're doing that. The other part of that, too, is if we look at even our juvenile system or our correctional system, the cuts here in Kane County, when it comes to, again, social workers and counselors and so forth, yes, even our adults still need that help as well, and they need to have that support. We need to find a way to make sure we're funding those things.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. DeWitt, criminal justice. The state has not passed legislation dealing with many of the recommendations from the Governor's Commission on Criminal Justice and Sentencing Reform. Would you support sentencing reform? Why or why not?
I've not read the study.
It's long.
I understand.
It's good. And your predecessor was on that commission, Karen McConaughey.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've not read the study. I am not familiar with the reforms that have been proposed. I do support law enforcement. I do support the strengthening of our sentencing laws in this state. That's an area I will need to study up on, having been in this position for 30 days. But I support strong law enforcement. I support stronger sentences for criminals, and we'll look at that issue hard in Springfield.
Ms. Zettler.
So I have not read the study either, but now I will. But I will tell you that the sentencing guidelines in this state with regards to relatively minor offenses and nonviolent offenses need to be changed. There's way too much incarceration of people who have minor drug infractions, and also any movement to privatize the penal system in this state needs to stop and be reversed, because anytime you profitize something like that, things get crazy and people end up staying in jail a lot longer than they should, or prison a lot longer than they should. They end up getting sent to prison for reasons they should not be sent to prison for. So I am, if the study has anything to do with putting things like that under control, I'm all for it. All for what their recommendations are. If it has anything to do with strengthening, sentencing and things like that, to me, that's just another way down the road to very unfair corrections and privatized corrections that we don't need.
Thank you. Ms. Corey.
I'd like to see more programs instituted in the jails. In DuPage County, we have an organization called Just DuPage. It is a completely volunteer. DuPage County supports it financially, and they change lives. I mean, they offer these inmates spiritual guidance, job training guidance, social guidance, mental guidance, and it has shown to decrease recidivism. There's a program that teaches men and women entrepreneurial skills, which I find is very interesting, because even if they don't go, once they release, even if they don't open a business, the skills that they have of taking a risk and responsibility, and all of those things have also helped their lives. We need to work on changing lives so they don't return back to jail.
Ms. Villa.
We need to make sure that we have judges who are willing to look past who are willing to be fair in their judgments. My students of color, my students who are boys of color, have such high risk of ending up in our prison system. It's disgusting. Privatization of jails is, I agree with Nancy that I'm completely opposed to this. When we look at the sentencing for our youth and for young men of color compared to their counterparts who are not people of color, it's awful, and it's something that needs to be reformed. We can't continue to go down this path of incarcerating people based on the color of their skin.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
So I've not read the exciting commission's report yet either, but I can.
I have many copies of it in my car.
I will make sure to get one from you before.
Me
the end of
too.
the evening.
I'll take one.
There you go. So you can give us all one. But with that being said, there definitely are some reforms that I can speak to. And if you are all lucky enough to hear Lark Card up here talking about some of these things as well, right? And these are the conversations I've had not just with people like Lark, but also even in walking door to door that I've met people who are part of the Kane County judicial and/or penal system. So the idea, first and foremost, is when we moved away from this sort of idea of rehabilitation, I don't know when that occurred, because I thought that that's part of what was a goal of our prison systems, our juvenile systems. And I think part of the issue is then again, I'll go back to what I just talked about, then when we reduce counseling, when we reduce social work, when we take away the electronic monitoring, which was incredibly important with the penal system here in Kane County. All those things are things which allow not only that, but also the parole. Oh, I'm out of time. Can I just finish that really quickly?
Yes.
So with the parole aspect, again, is that if we're not going to give supports to these people so that they can get out and work and become productive citizens, they're going to continue to return back into the prison system.
Thank you. Mr. Ugaste.
I wish I could say I had read the study, but I'm going to make it a clean slate. I am not familiar with it either. And as much as I wish I could address it, I cannot. I agree with much of what Ben said, especially Ms. Curry's comments on rehabilitation. I believe that's very important to help those who are currently inmates and in the prison population from returning. We need to do something there. And as she also said, it doesn't stop there. It's when they get out as well, and helping them find jobs and providing jobs to them. There's this situation we're in of low unemployment, extremely low unemployment, and a great economy throughout the United States is providing a situation where people are actually starting to provide opportunities to felons now because they need people to fill jobs, and that's one way we can help.
Thank you. Near and dear to my heart. But that wasn't my question. Somebody in the audience. Thank you. I appreciate it. Last question. Governor Rauner recently vetoed the Equal Pay Act of 2003, which was amended to include a provision prohibiting employers from asking new employees about their salary history. Do you support or oppose that veto?
Who's up?
And we're starting with Ms. Settler.
I oppose that veto. I oppose that veto because it not only stopped the amendment to the Act of 2003, which was to prevent employers from asking women, and everybody, frankly, what their salary history was, because what that would end up doing is carry forward any inequality that there was in the woman's history. So I'd also, unfortunately, he has tried to basically gut the entire act through his mandatory veto, and that includes penalizations for employers who do pay women differently than they pay men, especially women of color, things of that nature. So it's an abomination, in my opinion, as far as it goes with regards to equality, and I would definitely vote to override that veto.
Thank you. Ms. Corey.
So I'm a business owner, so I hire people all the time, and I don't think that bill, haven't seen any evidence that that bill would have changed anything. We hire people based on who they are and their abilities, and that's how we hire people. Every employee we have makes more than minimum wage, and we base it solely on your skills and your ability.
Thank you. Ms. Villa.
I think that there's probably a few powerful women in the audience tonight that could explain why this is so critical, that we make sure that we pass the Equal Pay Act, and that we are able to make sure that it's not, that employers are not allowed to ask the salary history. If women are going to get to the place where they're making the same amount as men, we cannot be asking them what they made in their previous job.
Mr. Johnson.
So I'm glad to hear a business owner that's here with us today talk about how important it is to her that we're looking at the content of character and the experience and so forth, and that's what what she uses to pay her employees. Unfortunately, not all are the same, right? And this is what the purpose was of the amendment to the Equal Pay Act. And the amendment and the purpose was, of course, was to block others who are still trying to find other ways to discriminate against someone because of because they're a man or a woman. And so I'm definitely absolutely against the veto. I think that this is something that is incredibly important and another way to make sure that we are protected and that discriminatory practices by employment is not acceptable, especially in cases such as these when it comes to gender. Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Yogaste.
As a father of 3 daughters, I completely support equal pay. And I believe that anyone who is discriminating on basis of gender is wrong, and there are laws in place to take care of that. That having been said, I support the veto. I don't believe the bill as originally written is going to accomplish its goals or is appropriate. So I support the veto for that purpose, or for that reason.
Mr. DeWitt.
I think Ms. Zettler and I have finally found something we agree on. I will not support the veto. I agree, having read the amendatory veto that the governor resubmitted, that his veto took all of the teeth out of the original statute. I have spoken to Senator Christina Castro from Elgin, who was the Senate sponsor for that bill, and we have discussed my co-sponsoring that bill in Springfield. I will not support the veto.
Thank you. And now we'll go with closing, and we'll start with Ms. Corey.
Thank you. Again, thank you for being here this evening and giving us this opportunity to talk about real issues. As I said earlier, I have received the endorsement from all three major newspapers, the Chicago Tribune, the Daily Herald, and the Chicago Sun-Times. All believe that I have the skills and the temperament necessary and what is needed down in Springfield. So I hope to take my experience and my skills as a county board member who has led the efforts to always have a balanced budget, cut our budget. DuPage, again, is the safest county in the state and best education county in the state. And I believe in pension reform, and lowering property taxes is my main focus, because when I knock on doors, everyone's main issue is paying high property taxes. So that is one of the main things that I want to focus on, and we can lower property taxes if we do pension reform, consolidation, and fair and equitable property tax assessments. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Villa.
Thank you all for tonight, for being here, and League of Women Voters as well for hosting this. I'm proudly endorsed by Equality Illinois, Sierra Club, the Illinois Nurses Association, the Illinois Educators Association, the Illinois Federation of Teachers. The list is very long, a lot of laborers that also have endorsed me. But mostly, I have been endorsed by many people at the doors. And I just encourage each and every one of you to go out and vote, because in 18 days, now we can just say 17, it's going to be a really big day. It's going to be really important. And most of all, your endorsement, your individual endorsements at the ballot box, that's the one that I want. That's the one that's going to matter the most. Thank you, and have a great night.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you all for staying out late with us tonight. Who knew we were going to be here talking about politics till 10 o'clock, huh? Yeah, you didn't think about that. So thank you, all of you, for coming tonight. It is incredibly important. And to echo, which I'm sure we're all going to talk about, is 18 days away from the election. This has been an incredible journey, and I've met many people in my walks. I've been to thousands of doors as well, and it's tough. I was telling you the last forum that, it was funny. I was talking to my daughter, and one thing she said to me is, she said, "Well, you're always gone." I said, "Well, I'm trying to do something important, honey." And she said, "Well, I want you to quit." I know. And I said, "Well, honey, this is really important," and it is. And it's important for our children. It's important for our environment. It's important for many issues. And that's why I chose to run. And I chose to run because it's important for our education, for our kids, for women, for the environment. Please get out and vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yogas.
Thank you. Thank the League of Women Voters and all of you for coming tonight. Thank all the candidates for showing up and participating. We are now in what I call the once great state of Illinois. It's how I refer to it. Yet, despite years of decline and lately rapid decline, we have an infrastructure that's still the best in the nation, probably. We have cultural and education institutions that are top-notch, and we still have the best workforce in the country as far as I'm concerned. But that's not going to last forever. People are leaving the state, they're fleeing it quickly, and we're not bringing new businesses or new people in. The choice is clear. My opponent means more of the same. That party's been in leadership for a long time. It's higher taxes and out-of-control spending and an astronomical debt. A vote for me is a vote for change and turnaround. We can move this state forward again. We can move it through more efficient government, and the people of Illinois, and not those in government, will be served. We'll work to lower taxes and make this place a place where people want to return and locate, and I would appreciate your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters for the event this evening. I bring a 25-year track record of conservative government as an alderman, as a mayor in a successful city, and as a representative representing Kane County on the RTA board. I did receive the endorsement of the Daily Herald and the Chicago Tribune because they agree that conservative efforts are what are required in Springfield to stop the tax and spend philosophies of 22 years of Democratic control in Springfield. Voters will have a real choice in the coming election. It will be whether we stay with that tax and spend philosophy or whether we get back to conservative views to try to stop the exodus of tens of thousands of people on an annual basis who leave this state looking for brighter futures, brighter economies, and brighter futures for their families. I'll appreciate all of your votes, and please do vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zettler.
So I find it interesting, excuse me, that we decry the spending, excess spending allegedly that's going on in this state, but we've heard several Republicans on this panel tonight talk about how we have to fund programs that I agree we need to fund. I think we need to put back the money that was taken from these programs by the slash and burn tactics of Governor Rauner when he came into the state to try to destroy this state and our economy so that he could get his way with hurting working people. We need to replace all that money, and we need to do it by making sure that the wealthiest people in this state pay their fair share, and we need to make sure that corporations in this state actually pay taxes, and that we need to stop handing out millions and millions, probably billions of our property tax dollars to corporations who just want them and don't need them. We will reduce property taxes if we stop doing that, because the majority of that kind of money that's given away is through property taxes, and it's done like people like my opponent, and he wants to continue that.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. The League of Women Voters is hosting a forum on home rule on Sunday at 4 o'clock at Shannon Hall at the East Side Community Center. So any Batavia residents who are interested in the home rule issue, please feel free to attend. I want to give everyone a round of applause for coming. You guys have been awesome. And thank you for coming out.